I was having dinner with my daughter and her new husband at one of Seattle's most expensive restaurants, celebrating their honeymoon, when he stepped outside to take a business call. It felt like a normal, happy night until an elderly man approached our table. His face was pale. His hands were shaking. He slipped a folded note into my palm and whispered, "Your daughter is in danger. Get her out. Now." I didn't know who he was or why he was warning me. I didn't know how dangerous the man my daughter had married might be. But when you're a father, you trust your instincts. So I listened. That choice saved our lives. I appreciate you staying with me. Before we continue, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I read them all. And a quick reminder, certain details in this story are enhanced for dramatic and educational purposes. Any connection to real names or places is unintentional, but the message behind it is something I hope stays with you. It was a cool October night in 2024 when everything I believed about safety, family, and control shattered in a single breath. For 28 years, I built houses across Seattle. I learned early that a structure is only as strong as its foundation. You pour concrete carefully. You measure twice. You check load-bearing walls. If you cut corners, the building may look perfect, but eventually it cracks. I thought that principle applied to life. I believed I had built a steady, secure world for my daughter. I believed love, honesty, and hard work were enough to protect her. I was wrong. The restaurant Emma chose that night was the kind of place I would never have picked on my own. Soft amber lighting washed over exposed brick walls. The hum of low conversations blended with the delicate clink of wine glasses. The menu didn't list prices casually. You had to look for them. And when you did, you pretended not to react. It was elegant, controlled, expensive. Emma had always had refined taste. She got that from her mother, Sarah. 5 years had passed since Sarah died, but sometimes I still saw her in the way Emma tilted her head when she laughed. 3 weeks into her marriage, Emma looked radiant. Not just happy, secure, peaceful. The kind of glow I hadn't seen since before Sarah got sick. That glow meant everything to me. When I walked her down the aisle just 3 weeks earlier, I had told myself I was giving her into good hands. So why did my stomach feel like concrete sinking in wet ground? Dad, Emma said, with a soft laugh, catching me staring across the candlelight. "You're doing that thing again." "What thing?" I asked. "That inspection look." She nudged Adrian gently. "Like you're checking him for cracks in the drywall." Adrian chuckled easily. That was one of his gifts. He could laugh without tension. "I can handle it," he said smoothly. "Your dad just wants to make sure I pass inspection." He lifted his glass toward me. "Foundation's solid, Patrick. I promise." I smiled back, but my chest stayed tight. Adrian Carmichael had entered Emma's life 6 months earlier. 6 months. From first date to engagement to wedding. It had all happened with the speed of a contractor trying to finish before winter storms. And he had taken control of everything. The marriage paperwork, the insurance updates, the joint accounts, the beneficiary changes. He'd insisted Emma didn't need to worry about legal details during wedding planning. "I'll handle it," he'd told her, and she had trusted him. That's what love does. It lowers your guard. Emma was describing their honeymoon cabin near Mount Rainier Fireplace Lake, view morning fog, drifting over the trees, when Adrian's phone vibrated against the table. He glanced down at it. For less than a second, something changed in his face. A flicker, a tension. Then it vanished. "I'm sorry," he said, already pushing back his chair. "It's about the Henderson property. I have to take this." Emma's voice held mild disappointment, but no suspicion. On a Friday night, real estate doesn't sleep. He leaned down and kissed the top of her head. 2 minutes. I watched him walk toward the entrance phone pressed to his ear. Through the glass doors, I saw him step into the misting drizzle outside, and that's when I felt it. The sensation that someone else was watching. At the table beside us sat an elderly man I'd noticed earlier in passing. Silver hair, worn cardigan, a bowl of soup barely touched. His hands trembled slightly, as they held a folded piece of paper. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring at Emma, not admiringly, desperately. Before I could process it, he stood. For a man his age, he moved with surprising urgency. He slipped between tables, ignoring the startled looks from other diners. I half rose from my chair, ready to intervene if he came too close to my daughter. But he didn't look at her. He locked eyes with me, and I saw something that chilled me straight to the bone. Fear, not mild concern, not confusion, terror. His hand shot forward and grabbed mine on the table. His grip was cold and stronger than I expected. Before I could pull away, he pressed the folded paper into my palm. "Your daughter," he whispered, voice barely audible under the restaurant's soft music. His eyes flicked toward the glass doors where Adrian stood in silhouette. "Read this. When he comes back, you leave." "What are you?" I began. "A father knows," he said more firmly. "Trust your gut. Don't ignore it." Then he let go. He turned and shuffled quickly toward the exit, head down, shoulders tight, as if he'd just done something that terrified him. "Dad." Emma's voice broke through my shock. Who was that? I stared at the folded paper burning against my skin. Through the window, Adrian ended his call. He straightened his jacket. That familiar smile slid back into place like it had never left. We had seconds. My hands trembled as I unfolded the note beneath the table, shielding it from Emma's view. The handwriting was uneven but readable. "Your daughter is in danger. The man she married has ended lives before 3 women I know of. He marries them, gains control of their assets, then they die in accidents. Check her accounts. Check her insurance. Check every document she signed. They move quickly once it begins. There is an address below. Come tonight if you want proof. Please get her away from him. Now." An address was written underneath. Southeast Seattle. My pulse pounded in my ears. 3 women? Accidents. Money. Outside, Adrian reached for the door. Dad, Emma leaned closer. "You look pale." "What's wrong?" I looked up at her. My little girl. My only child. The same face that had looked at me with total trust when I ran behind her bike, steadying the seat, promising I wouldn't let her fall. She had signed everything he put in front of her. Adrian pushed the door open and stepped back inside. Warm air swallowed him. His expression was calm, polished, controlled. I had spent decades walking through houses just before final inspection. Sometimes everything appeared flawless, the paint smooth, the beams aligned. But if you'd built enough homes, you learned to sense weakness before it showed. A subtle shift in the floor, a tension in the frame. Something about this felt the same. Adrian approached the table, smile effortless. "Sorry about that." The folded paper felt like a brick in my hand. Every instinct in me screamed the same warning move. We didn't have minutes. We had seconds. Sometimes you don't have proof. Sometimes you don't have logic. Sometimes as a father you just know. And in that moment I made my choice. The moment Adrian disappeared through that glass door, the clock in my head started ticking. 60 seconds, maybe less, before he'd finish his call and turn around. 60 seconds to convince my daughter to abandon her honeymoon dinner and trust a father's instinct over everything her heart was telling her. I didn't have time for subtlety. "Emma," I said, my voice cutting through her thoughts about the dessert menu. "We need to leave. Right now." She blinked, her smile faltering. "What, Dad? We haven't even..." "Now, sweetheart." I was already standing, pulling cash from my wallet and tossing it on the table. "We're going." "Dad, what's going on?" "Are you sick?" Through the window, Adrian's silhouette shifted under the streetlights. He angled back toward the entrance. 30 seconds, maybe less. I leaned across the table. "Emma, do you trust me?" She stared at me. "Dad, you're scaring me." "I know, I'm sorry. But answer me. Do you trust me?" Something in my voice made her really look at me. I watched memories flicker behind her eyes, every promise I'd kept, every nightmare I'd chased away. She nodded slowly. "Yes, always." "Then stand up and follow me. No questions, not here." She glanced toward Adrian outside, then back at me. Confusion battled loyalty. But my daughter has never gone back on her word. Okay, she whispered, reaching for her purse. I scanned the restaurant mapping exits. Walking out the front wouldn't work. Adrian would see us the moment he turned around. I needed distraction. I needed movement. I needed chaos. There it was. The red handle near the restrooms. Fire alarm. 28 years in construction meant I knew the consequences. False alarm. Fines. Maybe worse. But my daughter's life was folded in the paper inside my pocket. Sometimes being a good father means breaking the law. Stay close, I said, gripping her hand. Dad, what are you? I didn't answer. I pulled her toward the wall. A waiter tried to stop me, but I was already there. My hand wrapped around the cold metal. For half a heartbeat, I hesitated. Then I pulled. The alarm exploded into sound piercing relentless. Strobes flashed, turning the elegant dining room into a stuttering nightmare of light and noise. For 1 second, everyone froze. Then panic. Chairs scraped. Glass shattered. People surged toward the exits in a single, desperate wave. Beautiful chaos. I pulled Emma into the flow, shielding her with my body, steering us toward the glowing green exit sign over the emergency door. Dad! She shouted. What did you do? Saving your life, I yelled back. We hit the crash bar together and stumbled into the October drizzle. The alley behind the restaurant was narrow and dark, lit only by a flickering security light. The exit alarm joined the symphony, echoing against brick walls. Rain soaked us instantly. Emma stood there, breathing hard, eyes wide. Dad, she whispered. What is happening? Before I could answer, heavy footsteps pounded behind us. Emma. Adrian. I pulled her into the shadows beside a dumpster and pressed a finger to my lips. Through the open door, Adrian's silhouette appeared backlit by flashing lights. He stepped into the alley, phone flashlight slicing through the rain. Emma, louder now. Baby, where are you? The front of the restaurant must have been chaos fire trucks evacuating diners, but he'd come to the back. How did he know? Emma trembled beside me. I felt her wanting to call out to fix this. I tightened my grip and shook my head. Adrian stepped farther into the alley. The flickering light caught his face. The worried husband was gone. What replaced it was cold and focused. His eyes swept the alley with predator calm. When they passed over us, I stopped breathing. 3 heartbeats. Then his phone rang. He swore and answered. What? No, I'm looking for them. I don't know, she just disappeared. Yes, with her father. The alarm went off. I'll find them. Give me a minute. His voice moved back toward the door. I waited 30 seconds, then pulled Emma from hiding. We moved quickly toward the far end of the alley. My truck was parked a block away. We reached the side street and I glanced back. Through the rain and flashing lights, Adrian pushed through the crowd, out front, scanning faces. For a second, his eyes swept our direction, and his face, God. The charm was gone. The warmth, the easy smile, the perfect son-in-law mask erased. In its place was something colder, patient, calculating. A man adjusting strategy after losing control of the board. Something that told me the old man's warning hadn't been paranoia. It had been survival. Emma followed my gaze and saw him too. Dad, she breathed, and this time there was no doubt in her voice. What did he do? I didn't answer immediately. The paper in my pocket felt heavier than steel. Not what he did, I said quietly. What he was planning. Her fingers tightened around mine as another fire truck roared past. Blue and red lights painted the street in violent color. He said he loved me, she whispered. I know. And you're saying, I'm saying we don't go back, I cut in. Not tonight. Not until I show you something. Behind us, Adrian turned in a slow circle, searching. His phone was back at his ear. His movements were controlled, not frantic. A hunter who knew his prey was close. My pulse hammered, but my mind was clear. He wasn't panicking. He was recalculating. Truck, I said. We moved. Fast, but not running. Running draws eyes. When we reached it, I unlocked the doors and ushered her inside. Rain drummed on the roof as I started the engine. Across the intersection, Adrian stepped off the curb, scanning the line of parked vehicles. For one terrible second, his gaze paused on my truck. Then another siren wailed, and a cluster of diners rushed between us, breaking his line of sight. I pulled into traffic. In the rearview mirror, I watched him shrink in the storm of lights and sirens. He stood still in the chaos, phone pressed to his ear face, expressionless. Waiting, planning. Emma stared straight ahead, silent now, the trust she'd given me settling like armor around us both. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. Whatever game Adrian thought he was playing, he'd just learned something important. I wasn't an old man imagining threats and shadows. I was a father who'd seen the predator behind the smile, and I was done pretending I hadn't. My living room had always been the safest place I knew. I built that house with my own hands 15 years ago, measured every beam, double-checked, every joint, reinforced the door frames, because I liked knowing the people inside were protected. But that night, as rain tapped against the windows, and wind dragged wet leaves across the driveway, the room felt different. Smaller. Exposed. Every shadow stretching along the walls seemed alive, as if danger had followed us home and was waiting for the right moment to show itself. We hadn't spoken much during the drive back from the restaurant. Emma had stared out the passenger window, watching raindrops race each other down the glass. I kept my hands tight on the steering wheel and checked the rearview mirror constantly, too often. Every pair of headlights behind us made my pulse spike. Every turn I made, I expected someone to mirror it. No one did. Traffic thinned. Cars branched off. But the absence of proof didn't calm me. If anything, it made the silence heavier. When we pulled into my driveway, the house sat dark and quiet. It looked the same as it had that morning when I'd left for work, worrying about nothing more than a delayed lumber shipment and finishing the Henderson project before winter storms set in. That version of my life felt naive now, almost foolish. Emma followed me inside without hesitation. I locked the door, immediately slid the deadbolt into place, and walked room to room, checking windows. I tested the back door twice. Old habits, I told myself. When Emma was a kid, checking locks had been routine. Tonight it felt tactical, like I was preparing for something to push against them. "Dad," she said softly from the center of the living room. She was still wearing the dress from dinner, damp from the rain. Her mascara had smudged slightly beneath her eyes, and she looked younger somehow. Not the confident newlywed who'd walked into that restaurant glowing, but my little girl again, confused, and waiting for me to explain the world. "I need you to tell me what's happening," she said. "Right now." I took the folded note from my jacket pocket and smoothed it out on the coffee table under the lamp. The paper looked more fragile here in my living room than it had in that candlelit restaurant, but the words felt heavier. "We read the warning," I said, "but there's more here than just fear." I tapped the address at the bottom. "Someone wants us to go here. Tonight." "Who was that man?" Emma asked. "Why would he?" Her phone buzzed. The sound cut through the room like a siren. Adrian's name lit up the screen. His smiling photo, taken the night he proposed, filled the display. For a second, everything inside me wanted to believe this was all a misunderstanding, that he was calling because he was worried, that he loved her. Emma reached for the phone. "Don't," I said immediately. She looked at me. "Dad, I have to answer him." The fire alarm went off. We left. "He probably thinks something's wrong." "Something is wrong," I replied, sharper than I meant to. I forced myself to steady my tone. "Emma, that note told us to check your accounts. Before we talk to him, before we explain anything, I need you to look. My bank accounts." Her brows furrowed. "Dad, what does that have to do with—" "Please," I said. I didn't care how desperate I sounded. "If I'm wrong, we call him. We apologize. We fix this. But if I'm not—" I couldn't finish the sentence. Her phone buzzed again. Second call. The vibration echoed across the glass coffee table. Emma looked from the screen to me to the note. Something shifted in her expression. Not fear yet, but doubt. She exhaled slowly. Okay, she whispered. She pulled her laptop from her bag and opened it on the coffee table. The screen's glow cast pale light across her face. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard for a second before she typed in her password. The phone buzzed a third time. Neither of us moved. I'm logged in, she said. What am I looking for? Anything unusual, I answered. Transactions, changes, authorizations you don't remember. She clicked into her checking account and began scrolling. Groceries, utilities, dinner last week. Her voice trailed off. I leaned closer. There's a pending transfer. She swallowed. Scheduled for tomorrow. 9 a.m. How much? She rotated the laptop toward me. $65,000. The number didn't just sit there, it hit. That was nearly everything she had built over years of working, saving, being responsible. I'd taught her about emergency funds, about never letting anyone else control her finances. I'd thought she understood. I didn't authorize this, she said immediately. Dad, I swear. I know you didn't. I said, though my heart pounded hard enough to shake my ribs. Click details, I told her. She did. The authorization date showed 3 days earlier, 3 days into her marriage. The digital certificate carried her name, her signature, the insurance paperwork, she whispered. Adrian brought home forms, said we needed to update everything now that we were married. Beneficiaries, policies, accounts. He said he'd handle the digital submission because I was tired. Her voice began to crack. I signed on his laptop. The phone buzzed again. Fourth call. Check the savings, I said. She clicked into the next account. New restrictions appeared added 3 days ago. Any withdrawal over $500 required secondary authorization. Secondary authorizer Adrian Carmichael. Emma froze. Investments, I said quietly. She opened the investment portfolio. Beneficiary updated 3 days ago. Changed from me to Adrian. Her breathing became shallow. Life insurance, I said. She navigated to the company portal. Beneficiary updated 3 days ago. Every change bore her digital signature. Every single one time-stamped within 72 hours of their wedding. This isn't real, she murmured. I signed paperwork, yes, but not this. I wouldn't sign this. You didn't, I said. You signed what he put in front of you. Her phone vibrated again. Fifth call. Sixth. Seventh. The name Adrian Carmichael flashed relentlessly, as if sheer persistence could force us to pick up. Emma stared at it. What if he knows we left on purpose, she asked. What if he realizes we're suspicious? We don't even know the full scope yet, I replied. We need clarity before confrontation. She clicked through more accounts. Retirement, small brokerage, even her credit card. Everything showed subtle adjustments, permissions, shared access, beneficiary shifts. Each one legally binding. The pattern was undeniable. This wasn't careless paperwork. It was systematic. The old man's words echoed in my mind. They move fast once they start. Emma closed the laptop halfway and pressed her palms against her temples. Dad, she whispered, he wouldn't hurt me. I looked at her. I wanted to agree. I wanted to tell her love couldn't be weaponized like this. But numbers don't lie. He's already hurt you, I said quietly. Look at what's been done. The phone buzzed again. Eighth call. Emma's hand hovered over it. Years of instinct telling her to answer her husband, to explain, to soothe. Emma, I said firmly, look at the screen. Really look. She did, and I watched something shift inside her. Trust draining out. Reality settling in. The phone stopped buzzing. The silence that followed was worse. What if running was a mistake? She asked softly. What if that tipped him off? Then we adapt, I said, though. My mind raced. But ignoring this would have been worse. She opened the laptop again, scrolling back to the pending transfer. $65,000 scheduled to disappear in the morning. 3 weeks into marriage. 3 days after signing documents. It wasn't random. It was preparation. The phone lit up again. Ninth call. Neither of us moved. We sat there in the dim light of my living room, the rain still whispering against the windows, staring at the evidence that had just torn open her new life. The man she had married hadn't just merged finances. He had taken control. And if the warning was true, if finances were only the first step, then this wasn't about money at all. It was about timing. And whatever came next. We need to move, now! The decision came out of me before I could second-guess it. Emma's earlier question, what if he knows, had settled something in my mind. If Adrian sensed even a flicker of suspicion, whatever protection that folded note had offered us would evaporate. The address scrawled at the bottom wasn't just information. It was leverage. And leverage only worked if you acted before the other side realized you had it. Within minutes, we were in motion. Emma packed in silence. I told her to take only what she could carry easily, an overnight bag, essentials, her laptop. No sentimental items, no extra clothes. We weren't moving out. We were investigating. But urgency hung in the air like smoke. Adrian called twice while she was upstairs. The sound echoed down the hall, each time vibrating against hardwood floors. Emma came down with her bag half-zipped phone in hand, watching his name light up her screen. We didn't answer. By the time we pulled out of my driveway in my truck, he had called again. The drive across Seattle felt longer than it should have. Streetlights streaked across the windshield as the rain intensified, droplets smearing under the wipers in rhythmic arcs. The city slowly changed around us. The neighborhoods grew older. Houses sat closer together. Porch lights flickered over cracked sidewalks. The air itself seemed heavier. Emma sat rigid in the passenger seat, staring at her phone like it might explode. Another call came through. Then another. Each one went unanswered. "Keep it silent," I said quietly. She nodded. The address led us into southeast Seattle, to a street where most of the houses leaned slightly, as if exhausted from standing too long against harsh winters and tighter budgets. Paint peeled, lawns sagged, windows were patched rather than replaced. But the house at the end of the block was different. It sat on a narrow lot enclosed by a chain-link fence. The silver paint was freshly maintained. Even in the rain, the small garden inside the fence was carefully tended, roses still blooming, despite the cold soil turned recently in a vegetable patch. Whoever lived there valued order. Precision. I parked along the curb. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then the porch light flicked on. The door opened before I could knock. The elderly man from the restaurant stood framed in warm light. Under proper illumination, he looked closer to 65 than frail. His silver hair was combed neatly back. His posture straightened as he met my eyes. "Mr. Lawson," he said calmly. "Emma, please come in." The fact that he knew our names tightened something in my chest. Inside the house was modest but spotless. Hardwood floors shone under soft lamplight. Old furniture well-maintained, carefully positioned. The air smelled faintly of lemon polish and coffee. But it wasn't the furniture that stopped Emma in her tracks. It was the walls. Photographs covered nearly every inch of the living room walls. Dozens of them. Arranged in straight rows, evenly spaced like an exhibit. Young women smiled out from the frames. Wedding gowns, graduation robes, hiking trails, beach sunsets. Each photo had a small handwritten label beneath it. Names. Dates. Emma's breath caught. "My name is Henry Foster," the man said, gesturing for us to sit. His hands trembled slightly as he poured coffee from a carafe on the side table, but his voice remained steady. "I understand how this must feel. I promise you everything I am about to show you is documented." He walked to the first photograph, a brunette in a white wedding dress, smiling radiantly. "Lauren King," he said. "She married Adrian Carmichael 10 years ago." My pulse quickened. 6 months later, she died. Carbon monoxide poisoning. A faulty furnace in their rental property. He placed a copy of a marriage certificate on the table. Then a death certificate, both stamped official, ruled accidental. Next came paperwork showing property transfers, investment accounts, a life insurance policy. Everything passed to Adrian Carmichael. $425,000, Henry said. Emma's hands curled into fists on her lap. Henry moved to the next photo, a blonde woman in hiking gear standing against the backdrop of Mount Rainier. Kayla Roberts. Married Adrian 7 years ago. 8 months later, she fell during what authorities called a routine hike. She knew the trail, had climbed it dozens of times. More documents appeared. Marriage certificate, death certificate, asset transfers. $380,000. Henry's movements were methodical, controlled. He stepped to the third photograph, a red-haired woman in doctoral regalia. Nicole Turner, research scientist. Married Adrian 4 years ago. Less than a year into marriage, she died of an apparent prescription overdose. Opiates combined with alcohol. Again, the paperwork followed. $315,000. I did the math without meaning to. That's over $1.1 million. Henry nodded slowly. $1.12 million to be precise. Emma's face had gone pale. 3 women, she whispered. 4, Henry corrected gently. He reached for a thicker folder. The consistent link, he continued, is not only Adrian, it's his mother, Judith Carmichael. She's worked in the city records department for 17 years. Marriage licenses, death certificates, property transfers. She handles documentation most people never question. He laid out copies of filings processed through official channels. Judith's name appeared repeatedly as witness notary or administrative processor. The paper trail was clean, legally sound. She has access, Henry said. Access to alter timestamps, to backdate filings, to forge signatures if needed, to create documentation that survives audits. Emma shook her head slowly. That can't. It can, Henry said quietly. And it has. He explained the pattern clearly. Fast courtship, marriage within months, asset transfers within weeks, sometimes even before the ceremony, insurance policies updated, beneficiaries changed, and then, somewhere between 6 and 18 months later, an accident. Adrian would inherit everything, then he would disappear, let time blur suspicion, and start again. Why would she help him? Emma asked, voice barely audible. Money, Henry replied without hesitation. Likely 40% of each payout, nearly $500,000 across 3 cases. The room felt smaller. I looked at the photographs again. Not as framed memories, but as women who had trusted someone. Emma's next, I said quietly. Henry didn't hesitate. Yes. He slid forward another stack of documents. Property transfers dated 3 days after Emma's wedding. Insurance policies updated. Beneficiary changed to Adrian Carmichael. Projected value $890,000. Emma inhaled sharply. She has more assets than the others. Henry said gently. Her house. The stock options from her company. Her inheritance from her mother. From a financial standpoint, she represents the largest gain. Tears slid silently down Emma's cheeks. I placed my arm around her shoulders. How do you know all this? I asked Henry. And how did you know where we'd be tonight? Henry's expression hardened slightly. I've been tracking Adrian for 2 years, he said. Learning his patterns, his habits, his timing. He paused, and because I once helped him, the air in the room shifted. He walked to the far end of the display and tapped a 4th photograph. A young woman with dark curls and green eyes laughing at what looked like a beach picnic. Amanda Foster, he said softly. My stomach tightened. Officially, she died 2 years ago. Single vehicle accident on Interstate 5. Rainy night. Car went off an embankment. Adrian collected $750,000. He turned and met my eyes, but she didn't die. Emma lifted her head slowly. She survived, Henry continued, and she's been watching him ever since. Morning came without warmth. The sky over Seattle shifted from black to a dull steel gray clouds hanging low enough to feel like a ceiling pressing down on the city. I hadn't truly slept. I'd closed my eyes for short stretches on Henry's couch, if that was even his real name, only to see those photographs again each time I drifted off. Lauren in her wedding dress, Kayla on a mountain trail, Nicole in her doctoral gown, smiling, unaware. Emma had dozed in an armchair wrapped in a blanket Henry had placed around her shoulders before retreating to his bedroom. Every so often she stirred as if even in sleep, she knew safety was conditional. The phone rang at exactly 6 a.m. I was already awake. So was he. "She's ready to meet," he said without introduction. His tone no longer carried the fragile tremor from the night before. It was clipped now, focused, efficient. 15 minutes from here. Nancy's diner, 6:30 sharp. He ended the call before I could respond. Emma opened her eyes immediately. "Amanda," she asked. "Yes." I stood, stretching tension out of my back. Time to hear it from her. The drive was quiet. The streets were mostly empty except for delivery trucks and early shift workers heading toward warehouses and factories. The sky remained colorless, as if Seattle itself hadn't decided whether the day deserved to begin. Nancy's 24-hour cafe stood where an aging industrial zone brushed up against residential blocks that had long ago stopped pretending to be charming. The neon sign flickered the Y in Nancy's cutting in and out. It was the kind of place where coffee was poured endlessly and questions were left unasked. Inside, the vinyl booths were cracked but clean. A waitress with silver hair pulled into a tight bun, nodded at us, and poured coffee without commentary. We slid into a booth near the back wall. Emma wrapped both hands around her mug, as though she could anchor herself to something solid. The steam rose and fogged the air between us. At 6:32, the bell above the diner door chimed. I looked up. The woman who entered bore little resemblance to the vibrant figure in Henry's photograph. The Amanda from that image had looked alive, wind in her hair, eyes bright. This woman moved cautiously, dressed in muted clothing that blended into the room. She scanned the diner before walking toward us, shoulders slightly hunched, as though minimizing herself. But when she reached the booth and slid in across from us, I saw something that photographs never fully capture. Survivor's eyes, sharp, watchful, hardened. "Mr. Lawson?" "Emma." Her voice was controlled, neither hurried nor hesitant. "My name is Amanda Foster." She appeared mid-30s. A faint scar peeked above the collar of her sweater. "How do I know that?" I asked bluntly. "How do I know you're not working with him?" She didn't flinch. Instead, she reached up calmly and pulled her collar down slightly. The scar began near her jawline and traced downward along her neck, pale, jagged, unmistakable. "Because he did this," she said. "And because he believes I'm dead." She let the fabric fall back into place and lifted her coffee cup. "2 years ago, I married Adrian Carmichael," she began. "He was charming, attentive, present. Everything I thought I wanted. We met at a technology conference. He presented himself as a real estate developer with long-term investment plans." A faint, humorless smile flickered across her lips. 3 months later, he proposed. 6 months after that, we were married. Emma's fingers tightened around her mug. 3 months into the marriage, Amanda continued. He suggested a romantic road trip. The Cascade Loop. Highway 2 toward Stevens Pass. Her hands stiffened slightly, but her voice remained steady. He had tampered with the brakes and the steering column. When I tried to slow down on a curve, nothing responded. The car tore through the guardrail and rolled down the embankment. Emma inhaled sharply. "I was partially thrown through the windshield," Amanda said. "That's where the scar comes from." She paused briefly. "I remember being conscious, bleeding. I remember Adrian climbing down toward the vehicle." Her gaze drifted slightly, as if replaying it. He stood there for several seconds, watching, evaluating. Emma whispered he was checking. Amanda nodded once. Then he walked back up the embankment. A second car was waiting at the top of the road. He got in. They drove away. The waitress returned, silently refilled our cups, and moved off again. I crawled into the trees, Amanda continued. Instinct. I didn't want to be visible from the road. A hiker found me nearly 2 hours later. The EMTs told me later that another half hour and I wouldn't have survived. You let them think you died, I said. She met my eyes. I had no identification on me. The crash destroyed most of it. I was admitted as a Jane Doe. By the time I was conscious enough to speak clearly, I understood exactly what he had done. If Adrian discovered I survived, he would finish what he started. Emma swallowed. So I stayed dead, Amanda said. I allowed the paperwork to stand. I recovered under another name, quietly. When I was strong enough, I began watching. For 2 years, Emma murmured. Amanda nodded. I tracked his movements, observed his routines. I watched him begin relationships in Spokane and Portland. Neither advanced far enough for marriage. Then I saw your wedding announcement. Emma's breath faltered. I knew the timeline, Amanda said gently. I knew what came next. She placed a thick folder on the table. The weight of it was unmistakable. I contacted Henry, she said. I leaned forward. Henry Foster. Amanda's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. That's one of his names, she replied. She opened the folder. Inside were organized stacks of documents, property transfers, business registrations, driver's licenses, bearing different identities but the same face. The face of the man who had opened his door to us. Declan Mercer, Amanda said. The name landed heavily. He operates as a legitimate real estate developer, she continued. On paper, everything appears clean. But for 15 years, he has run a structured operation. He recruits men like Adrian, men capable of manipulating, capable of killing. He handles infrastructure shell companies, property acquisitions, laundering of funds. And Judith, I asked. Administrative support, Amanda replied. She processes documentation, adjusts records, facilitates clean transfers. She likely earns a percentage, but she is not the architect. Emma looked between us. So Declan is. Yes, I felt my jaw tighten. If he profits from this, if he built it, why warn us? Amanda slid out a final photograph. Grainy, but clear. A younger Declan Mercer stood beside a teenage girl. Melissa Mercer, Amanda said quietly. His daughter. Emma leaned closer. She died 23 years ago, Amanda continued. Official ruling, accidental overdose. She had been married 6 months. Her husband inherited everything. The diner's hum faded around us. He lost his daughter the same way he has helped others lose theirs, Amanda said. The pieces shifted in my mind. The house, I said slowly. The photographs. All real victims, Amanda confirmed. Real documentation. But curated. Arranged. He presents himself as a grieving father who discovered a pattern. In reality, he created the machine. Emma's hand found mine under the table. He contacted me months ago, Amanda said. Said he was finished. Said he could no longer carry the weight of it. That Adrian was becoming reckless. That the cycle needed to end. Or I countered quietly, he's calculating something bigger. Amanda held my gaze. That's possible. But he has supplied me with records I couldn't have accessed alone. He's exposed parts of his own infrastructure. And Adrian doesn't know, Emma asked. Not yet, Amanda answered. If Adrian suspects betrayal, he disappears. Declan understands that. I leaned back, absorbing it. So we sought refuge in the house of the architect, I said. Yes, Amanda replied evenly. And now that architect wants to dismantle his own creation. She nodded once. Outside, the sky brightened slightly, though the cold remained. Emma stared at the photograph of Melissa Mercer. If he truly wants this to end, she said softly, he'll have to sacrifice the person he trained. Amanda's expression didn't change, and that she said is exactly what he intends to do. The coffee in my hand suddenly tasted like betrayal. I turned slowly, already knowing what I would see. At the table directly beside ours, the one I had barely noticed when we sat down, was the man who had called himself Henry Foster. He had been there the entire time, listening. Waiting. You've been playing us, I said, my voice flat. The elderly posture vanished. He straightened, and the illusion dissolved. His shoulders no longer stooped. His eyes were sharp, not roomy. Even his voice when he spoke carried no tremor. Guilty, Declan Mercer said smoothly. But I also saved your daughter's life. At least for now. Emma's hand found mine under the table, her grip tight. Why, Amanda asked quietly. Why reveal yourself now? We could have walked away believing Henry was just another grieving father. Because we're past subtlety, Declan replied. And because Patrick needs to understand the choice in front of him. I'm not making any deals with you, I said. You haven't heard the terms. He leaned back comfortably. I've been running operations in the Pacific Northwest for 15 years. Tech executives, federal contractors, people with complex estates and clean public profiles. 1 or 2 cases a year, different cities spaced out enough to avoid patterns. The FBI has a file on me. It's thin. He gestured dismissively. Judith Carmichael, on the other hand, is sloppy. 4 victims in 10 years, same region. Greedy. Property transfers 3 days after a wedding that draws federal attention. And federal attention in Seattle is bad for my interests elsewhere. So you want her removed, Amanda said. I need her removed, but I can't do it directly. If she disappears, I'm the first suspect. However, he smiled, a concerned father uncovering a murder conspiracy. That's civic responsibility. You manipulated everything I said. The warning, the house, the photographs, Amanda. Declan saved me, Amanda said quietly. I turned to her. 2 years ago, I should have died on that mountain road, she continued. He had someone watching Adrian for separate reasons. When the crash happened, his people pulled me out and got me to a hospital. I survived because I agreed to help when he called in the favor. I gave you information, Declan said. You chose how to act. You ran from the restaurant. You came to the house. You believed what you saw. I opened doors, and now I asked. You expect me to take Judith down for you. I expect you to save your daughter. He pulled out his phone and turned the screen toward us. A live feed. Adrian's car parked outside a building I knew too well, Emma's apartment complex. He's been circling since midnight, Declan said calmly. He knows something is wrong. Judith will give the order within 24 hours. Maybe less. Emma went pale. You have 2 options, Patrick, Declan continued. Option 1, you work with me. We expose Judith completely. I provide additional evidence, things Amanda doesn't have. You take it to authorities. Judith goes to prison. Adrian follows. Your daughter lives. I disappear. And option 2, you refuse. You go to the police with what you have now. It's not enough for murder, maybe financial fraud at best. Judith and Adrian panic. They accelerate. And Emma becomes victim number 5. He stood buttoning his coat with precise calm. You have until 7 a.m. tomorrow. That's when Judith moves regardless. I know her patterns. And if I turn you in instead, I asked. Declan smiled faintly. Henry Foster doesn't exist. The house you visited has already been scrubbed. You can try, but time spent chasing me is time Adrian uses planning your daughter's accident. He stepped toward the door. Amanda followed silently. At the threshold, he paused. Choose wisely, Patrick. My way, Judith goes to prison. Your way, he shrugged. Adrian finishes what he started. The door chimed behind them. Through the window, I watched Amanda slide into the driver's seat of a black sedan, Declan beside her. They merged smoothly into morning traffic. Nancy returned, topped off our coffee, and left the check face down. The fluorescent lights buzzed. A low radio played classic rock. The world continued as if nothing had shifted. Dad. Emma's voice trembled. What do we do? I watched the sedan disappear around a corner. 24 hours. The sun climbed higher, stretching shadows across the parking lot. 24 hours to decide whether to make a deal with a crime boss or risk my daughter's life. Two predators, both dangerous, both wanting the other gone. Declan had called Judith sloppy, greedy, drawing attention. He had also made one mistake. He had assumed I would choose between them. But maybe the way to beat two hunters wasn't to ally with one. Maybe it was to turn them on each other. I looked at Emma, brave, frightened, alive. I think I said slowly, "We let them believe we're choosing." Her brow furrowed. What does that mean? It means we make Declan think we're working with him. We make Judith think we're running scared. And we give both of them just enough truth to make them doubt each other. Emma stared at me, understanding dawning. Divide them, she whispered. Yes. Declan relied on patterns. Judith relied on paperwork. Adrian relied on control. If we disrupted all three at once, maybe they'd turn inward instead of outward. 24 hours. Enough time to set a trap, but only if we moved first. Nancy's check sat between us. The world outside brightened with indifferent sunlight. I reached for my phone. First I said we call Declan back. Emma swallowed. And tell him what? That we're in. Her eyes searched mine. Are we? No, I said quietly. We're just making him think we are. Outside traffic thickened with morning commuters, unaware that somewhere between them, two criminal operations were preparing to move. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something that wasn't fear. Strategy. For most of the morning, I turned Declan's offer over in my mind, like a piece of broken glass, sharp from every angle. Help him expose Adrian, and I'd be partnering with the man who engineered the machine that killed those women. Refuse him outright, and we'd lose access to the one insider who understood how the operation functioned. Every direction felt contaminated. Justice on one side, complicity on the other. My conscience kept asking the wrong question. Which devil do you shake hands with? By noon, I understood the mistake. We weren't choosing between predators. We were building a cage big enough for both of them. I paced my living room 28 feet wall to wall, a measurement etched permanently into my memory, because I'd framed it myself 15 years earlier. I knew every board, every joint, every hidden nail. Emma sat curled into Sarah's old reading chair, her mother's faded quilt wrapped tight around her shoulders. She tracked my movements silently, watching the same strip of carpet darken beneath my repeated steps. Adrian's calls had stopped around 10 that morning. The silence unnerved me more than the ringing ever had. When a predator goes quiet, it usually means he's calculating. You're not actually thinking of helping Declan, Emma said at last. I stopped pacing. No, I replied. But I am thinking about letting him believe we are. Her eyes sharpened. You're going to play him. I'm going to play all of them. She straightened in the chair. That's dangerous. So is doing nothing. I moved to the coffee table and spread out the notes Amanda had given us, alongside the copies of Emma's altered financial documents. If we take Declan's deal at face value, we help him eliminate Adrian and Judith. He cleans up loose ends. He looks like the hero who ended a rogue branch of his operation. Emma frowned, which still leaves him free. Exactly. She leaned forward. So what's the plan? We gather proof that ties Declan, Judith, and Adrian together. Proof that doesn't rely on testimony. Proof that can't be erased or dismissed as coincidence. Judith's office, Emma said immediately. Yes. The city records building downtown rose from my phone screen as I pulled up its layout. 4 stories. Built in the late 90s. Renovated in 2012. Judith worked in property and transfer on the 4th floor, room 412. Standard municipal security, I muttered. Keycard access after hours. Cameras in hallways. 1 guard per shift. Emma stood and joined me, studying the floor plan. If we expose them publicly at the same time, they won't have room to shift blame. We need scale, I said. Witnesses. So many witnesses that burying it becomes impossible. My phone buzzed. Amanda. I answered and put her on speaker. Tell me you're calling with something useful, I said. Both useful and urgent, she replied. There was tension in her voice. Declan believes you're considering his proposal. He's expecting a decision by tomorrow morning. He won't get the answer he expects. I figured, she said, which is why you need this. There was background noise traffic, maybe a park. Judith works late Tuesdays and Thursdays. Amanda continued. Never weekends. Tonight's Thursday. Security guard named Carl does rounds every 40 minutes. Cameras in main corridors, stairwells and lobby. None inside individual offices. Budget cuts. Cleaning crew leaves by 11. There's a 10-minute window around 10:20 where the East Service entrance is propped open for trash pickup. Emma was already scribbling notes. Amanda, I said carefully, why are you helping us? A long pause followed. Because Declan saved my life, she said finally. But I never agreed to help him sacrifice another woman. If you're planning to burn this down, maybe it finally ends. The line went dead. Emma looked up at me. Tonight. Yes, I checked the time. 2:47 p.m. I'll head downtown around 5, I said. Watch the shift change. See where Carl starts his patrol. Identify blind spots. And tomorrow, she asked quietly. Declan's deadline is tomorrow morning. This was the part that felt like swallowing glass. Tomorrow, I said slowly, you go back to Adrian. Her face drained of color. Dad, just long enough to keep him steady. Morning coffee, public place, act normal. Apologize for overreacting. Take pictures if you can. Record audio if possible. But the goal is time. You want me to be bait. I want you to be the calmest person in the room. She folded her arms tightly. What if he suspects? Then he accelerates, I said. Which means we have to move first. I took her hands in mine. They were ice cold. By the time he realizes we're not playing his script, I said we'll already have what we need. And when this goes public, you won't be alone with him. You'll be somewhere crowded. Her breathing steadied. How do we make sure they can't stop us? She asked. I looked at the stack of evidence. At the names. At the dollar amounts. We don't hand this to one reporter, I said. We don't give it to a single agency and hope it sticks. Emma's eyes widened slightly. You're thinking bigger. We make it impossible to suppress. Understanding flickered across her face. A live stream. Yes. We go into Judith's office, she said slowly, thinking it through. We document everything on camera. Files, signatures, transfers, and then I continued, we wait. For what? For them. She inhaled sharply. You want them to show up. If Declan believes we're working with him, he'll want to control the outcome. If Adrian senses something's off, he'll chase it. If Judith sees activity in her office after hours, she'll respond. And thousands of people will be watching. That's the idea. I opened my phone and began recording. This is Patrick Lawson. October 15th, 2024, 3:02 p.m. My daughter Emma and I are preparing to expose a criminal conspiracy involving multiple suspicious deaths and fraudulent financial transfers. If this recording is being heard outside this device, it means something went wrong. I stopped and saved it. Insurance, I said. We upload everything to multiple cloud accounts. Share access with trusted contacts. Automated release if anything happens. Emma nodded slowly. Fear lingered in her eyes, but so did resolve. If Adrian senses I'm not afraid, she said quietly, he'll believe he still has control. That's exactly what we want. Her phone buzzed. A text. She looked down. Miss you. Coffee tomorrow, need to talk. The timing almost made me laugh. Perfect, I said. She hesitated. 10 a.m., I said. That cafe near his place. Lots of people. Her fingers trembled as she typed. Yes. I'm sorry about the other night. We should talk. 10 a.m. His reply came almost instantly. Can't wait. I love you. Emma stared at the words as if they'd physically struck her. I felt anger simmer low in my chest. Not loud, not explosive, but focused. Tonight I said I scout the building. Tomorrow morning you perform. After that we move. She looked at me. Not as a child, as a partner. What if Declan changes his mind, she asked. He won't, I replied. Not if he thinks he's in control. And if he isn't, Then he'll reveal himself. Outside, the afternoon light shifted toward evening. The city carried on traffic errands, office workers closing laptops. Somewhere across Seattle, Declan waited for confirmation he'd secured our cooperation. Judith processed paperwork with bureaucratic precision. Adrian planned whatever he believed would happen next. They all assumed time was on their side. It wasn't. I checked my watch. "I'll leave in 20 minutes, I said. "You stay here. Lock everything. Don't answer unknown numbers." She nodded. "And Emma," I added softly. "Yes, you don't flinch tomorrow." Her jaw set. "I won't." I grabbed my jacket and keys. By this time tomorrow, their operation would be exposed under floodlights. Not whispered about. Not buried in sealed files. Witnessed! And this time the names on the wall wouldn't be forgotten. This time the world would be watching. The afternoon after we broke into Judith's office felt suspended in a strange, fragile calm. We had what we'd risked, everything for copies of files, photographs of spreadsheets, transaction histories, mapping every death to every dollar. Multiple backups sat encrypted in the cloud. Links had been sent to secure accounts. Timed releases were in place if anything happened to us. And yet none of that made it easier to watch my daughter prepare to walk back into the arms of the man who planned to kill her. Emma stood in front of her bedroom mirror rehearsing. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic outside. She adjusted her hair, wiped at eyes that were no longer red from crying. Practiced the tilt of her head. The cadence of apology. "Hey, I'm sorry. My dad just panicked. He gets like that sometimes. Protective, you know," she said softly, testing the tone. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed tightly over my chest. Every instinct I had screamed at me to stop this, to tell her we'd find another way. "You don't have to do this," I said. She looked at me in the mirror. Not as a child asking permission, as a woman making a decision. "Lauren trusted him," she said quietly. "Kayla trusted him. Nicole trusted him. That's why they didn't see it coming." She turned to face me. "I'm going in knowing exactly what he is. That's the difference." I didn't argue again. She picked up her phone and stared at Adrian's name in her contacts. 36 hours since she'd spoken to him. 36 hours of unanswered calls, of silence that must have been gnawing at him. She inhaled slowly and pressed call. I could hear his voice faintly through the speaker the moment he answered. "Emma, where are you?" "I've been losing my mind." Relief laced his tone, but beneath it something else. Controlled. Measuring. "Adrian." "I'm sorry," Emma said, her voice trembling just enough to sound real. "Dad had this panic episode. He scared me." I didn't know what to think. A beat of silence. "It's okay," he replied smoothly. "I just want to know you're safe." "I am. Can we meet? I need to see you." "Of course." "The cafe near my place, 2 o'clock. "Perfect." She ended the call and looked at me. "He wants to believe me," she said. "That's his weakness," I answered. At 1:45 we left. I followed her car at a distance, careful not to draw attention. The cafe sat on a corner across from Adrian's apartment building. Lots of windows, lots of foot traffic. I parked across the street with a clear line of sight inside. My phone was mounted on the dash camera angled toward the entrance. Recording. Adrian arrived first. He chose a table that gave him visibility of the door and the sidewalk outside. He checked his reflection in the dark surface of his phone screen. Ran a hand through his hair. Adjusted his watch. He looked like a man preparing for reconciliation. At exactly 2 o'clock, Emma walked in. Adrian stood immediately. His expression transformed concern, warmth, just enough hurt to appear sincere. He pulled her into an embrace that looked protective, even tender. She let him. From where I sat, it was like watching a performance through glass. Their mouths moved, but I couldn't hear the words. I read posture instead. Emma's shoulders slightly drawn inward, Adrian leaning closer, his hand finding hers across the table. Coffee arrived. Emma laughed once, soft, convincing. Adrian relaxed visibly. 20 minutes passed. Then Adrian leaned forward and said something that made Emma nod slowly. He gestured toward the street, toward his building. My chest tightened. She hesitated just enough to appear uncertain. Then she agreed. They stood. He paid. His hand rested lightly on the small of her back as they stepped outside. I counted to 30 before starting my engine. Adrian's building was modern glass steel secure entry. I parked down the block where I could see the third-floor windows. I texted her, "I'm here." 3 dots appeared. "I know." Then going up. The next 2 hours stretched endlessly. Every scenario played out in my head. Every possible outcome. I checked the time every few minutes. Watched the windows. Waited. Later, Emma told me what happened inside. Adrian had been flawless. He offered wine, put on low music, spoke gently, apologized for any misunderstanding. Then he brought out folders, paperwork spread neatly across a glass coffee table. Insurance updates, he'd said casually. Now that we're married, we should finalize everything. Standard stuff. Emma had tilted her head, confused. It looks complicated. It's routine, he assured her. We just need to complete it soon. Before the hiking trip. The hiking trip. Her phone was tucked inside her purse camera lens, angled through a small opening. It silently captured everything. When Adrian stepped into the kitchen to refill wine glasses, Emma moved. Quick, controlled. She flipped through the stack of documents, photographed every page, spreadsheets, names, dollar amounts, timelines. And at the bottom of one page, in Adrian's precise handwriting, Emma Lawson, net worth, $890,000. Timeline, 3 days, method. Hiking accident, North Cascades, date. October 18th, 3 days. He had already mapped it out, trail locations marked. Forecast conditions noted. A curve in the path where cell service dropped. A section of terrain steep enough to mimic a fall, meticulous, clinical. When he returned, she was seated again, pretending to read a harmless dental insurance update. He watched her sign. See, he said with a smile. Easy. She stayed another hour, listened, laughed, let him kiss her goodbye at the door. At 4:47 p.m., my phone buzzed. I stepped out of the truck and met her halfway down the block. The moment she reached me, the facade dissolved. She was shaking. I got it, she whispered. We climbed into my truck. She opened her phone and handed it to me. I scrolled. Lauren King, Kayla Roberts, Nicole Turner, each name listed beside projected payout totals. Then additional names. Women he had researched. Estimated assets beside each one like they were business prospects. And finally Emma's page, October 18th, 3 days from now. He kept talking about hiking, she said, her voice hollow. Said it would be romantic. Just us. I thought. She shook her head. He's already chosen the spot. I stared at the details. Weather patterns, backup dates, even contingency plans. It was written like a project outline. He accelerates when he senses movement, I said quietly. Emma's eyes were glassy, but steady. He thinks I signed the updates. He thinks I'm coming hiking. I pulled her into an embrace. She felt smaller than she had that morning. You were incredible, I told her. You did exactly what we needed. She pulled back and wiped her eyes. We have proof from Judith's office, she said. And now this. Both ends of the chain. I nodded slowly. 3 days. That was his schedule. But we weren't waiting. We moved tonight, I said. Her gaze locked onto mine. No more delays. No more delays, she agreed. Across the city, Adrian likely believed he had regained control. That his timeline remained intact. He had no idea that the very plan he'd written out so confidently was now sitting in my hands. 3 days. He thought he had 3 days. He didn't even have one. That afternoon, after Emma finally drifted into a shallow, exhausted sleep on the couch, I grabbed my keys and headed downtown. She needed rest before tomorrow's performance. I needed reconnaissance. 28 years in construction had taught me something most people never think about. No building is invincible. Every structure has stress points. Every security system has blind spots, concrete ages, cameras miss angles, human beings fall into patterns. Judith Carmichael worked inside one of those structures, and I intended to learn it. Downtown Seattle at 5 p.m. was a moving current of people, office workers flowing toward bus stops and parking garages, conversations overlapping heels, striking pavement in hurried rhythm. I parked 3 blocks from the City Records building and crossed the street to a small coffee shop with a front window facing the entrance. I ordered something I didn't taste and claimed a table near the glass. From there I watched. The City Records building looked exactly like the era that birthed it, 1970s brutalist architecture. 6 stories of poured concrete stacked in rigid symmetry. Narrow vertical windows like slits in a fortress wall. Functional. Cold. Built during a time when government buildings were designed to feel immovable. I had worked on a seismic retrofit for a similar structure in 2019. I knew the type. Reinforced sheer walls, aging electrical conduits hidden behind panels that had been repainted but never replaced, security upgrades layered onto original bones. At 5:05 p.m., the first wave of employees exited. At 5:15, I spotted Karen, the staffer Amanda had mentioned. Mid-40s, tired posture, canvas tote slung over one shoulder. She tapped her earbuds in and joined the stream heading toward the bus line. Inside, through the front glass, I could see the security desk. Carl, mid-50s, broad around the waist. Uniform slightly wrinkled. He leaned back in his chair until 5:18, then stood stretched, picked up a handheld radio, and disappeared down an interior corridor. I checked my watch. The timing started. 40 minutes later, Carl reappeared at the desk. He made a notation in a logbook, adjusted his chair, took a sip from a thermos. Predictable. That was good. I finished the coffee I hadn't been drinking and stepped outside. Instead of approaching the main entrance, I circled the block. The front doors were heavily covered camera domes above both entry points, keycard panels glowing red beside them. The north entrance mirrored it, too exposed. The rear alley told a different story. Behind the building, a shared service corridor ran between 2 neighboring office complexes. The pavement was cracked. Graffiti faded on a brick wall opposite the loading dock. At 6:30 p.m., a maintenance truck backed into the service area. 2 workers in gray coveralls stepped out and began unloading supplies. One propped the metal service door open with a wheeled cleaning cart, while the other carried equipment inside. I didn't approach. I watched from the opposite side of the alley. The door stayed open for nearly 15 minutes. Standard practice. Convenience over security. Near the doorway, a laminated schedule was posted in a plastic sleeve. I walked casually past, pretending to check my phone while reading it. Cleaning crew arrival 10 p.m., departure 11 p.m. 4 hours to service 6 floors. Amanda had been right. I continued my perimeter walk. Camera domes were mounted at regular intervals along the exterior, visible enough that someone wanted them seen. Heavy coverage on the lower 3 floors where public counters operated during business hours. I counted. The 4th floor property and transfer had 2 visible corridor cameras based on the external placements and what I could infer from window positioning. No obvious stairwell cameras. Older buildings often skipped stairwell upgrades during retrofits. Too expensive. Too little perceived risk. That was our entry point. I returned to my truck parked several blocks away and opened my notes app. Sketch. Parking garage beneath building likely accessed via ramp near service alley. Service entrance propped during cleaning. Stairwell connects all floors. 4th floor, 2 corridor cameras. Room 412 end of hall per Amanda. At 8 p.m., I came back. Downtown had changed. Rush hour was gone. Sidewalks thinned. Streetlights cast long reflections across damp pavement. The building loomed darker now, most windows black except a handful on upper floors. Carl's silhouette was visible again behind the glass. I resumed timing. He stood at 8:07, walked out of frame, 40 minutes. Returned at 8:47, logged something. Saturday, same rhythm. By 9:30, I knew his patrol cycle down to the minute. He began rounds at roughly 7 minutes past each hour. Spent approximately 12 minutes covering the first 2 floors. Another 10 on floors 3 and 4. Brief pause near the stairwell on 5. Then back to desk, which meant there was a window. After the cleaning crew left at 11 p.m., there would be a 15-minute lull before Carl initiated his next patrol. 11:15 p.m. That was our entry point. I leaned back in my truck seat and reviewed everything again. Enter via service entrance at 11:15 p.m. Use stairwell to avoid corridor cameras. Reach 4th floor while Carl remains on lower levels. Access room 412. Document rapidly files, drives, hard copies. Exit before midnight patrol. 20 minutes. 20 minutes to gather proof of years of fraud and murder. 20 minutes to capture documentation, tying Judith to altered records and Declan to orchestration. 20 minutes to secure my daughter's future. One deviation, Carl decides to check stairwell early. Cleaning crew lingers. A door doesn't open as expected. We lose more than evidence. I started the engine and let it idle. Seattle's skyline glowed softly in the distance. People moved along sidewalks unaware of the battle unfolding in a quiet municipal building. I drove slowly through downtown, memorizing streets and escape routes. Left on Cherry, right onto 4th. Back alley cut through if needed. Then I headed home. As I passed restaurants filled with couples laughing over dinner and theaters where movie posters promised escape, the contrast hit hard. Emma should have been living that life. Planning a honeymoon extension? Picking out furniture? Instead, she was rehearsing lines to deceive a man who had penciled in her death like an appointment. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the sky was nearly black. 2 hours until 11:15 p.m. 2 hours to finalize equipment? 2 hours to tell my daughter I loved her in case. Inside, Emma was awake again, sitting upright on the couch. "You went," she asked. "I went," I said. "And it's doable." Her shoulders straightened slightly. I laid out the plan in detail, timing patrol cycles, stairwell access, camera placements. She listened carefully, absorbing each piece. "We stick to schedule," I said. "No improvisation." She nodded. "And if something changes?" she asked. "Then we abort," I replied firmly. "We don't risk exposure unless we can control it." I checked my watch. 10:05 p.m. We packed lightly, phones, fully charged, small flashlight gloves. Cloud backups confirmed. Evidence uploaded. I looked at her one more time. "You don't have to come," I said quietly. She shook her head. "I'm not letting you do this alone." 2 hours earlier, I had been a contractor scouting a building. Now I was a father preparing to break into one. Not because I thought I was brave, not because I believed I couldn't fail, but because Emma's name sat on a spreadsheet inside that building with a dollar amount beside it. Because Lauren King never saw it coming. Because Kayla Roberts trusted a man who led her to a cliff. Because Nicole Turner died believing she was loved. Because Amanda Foster survived when she wasn't supposed to, and had carried that burden long enough. Sometimes protection means locks and alarm systems, and sometimes it means walking directly into darkness and pulling the truth out by its roots. 11:15 p.m. approached. 28 years of building structures had taught me how they stood. Tonight I would learn how to break into one. And if everything went according to plan by morning, the walls Judith had hidden behind for years would no longer protect her, or Declan, or Adrian. By tomorrow, their fortress would belong to the light. 11:15 in downtown Seattle felt like standing at the bottom of something vast and cold, like the ocean floor pressure from every direction. Darkness pressing close, silence so complete it felt artificial. Emma sat beside me in the truck on sub-level B2 of the City Records building garage, a USB drive tucked into her coat pocket, her face pale beneath the brim of her baseball cap. Fear was there, unmistakable, but so was resolve. "Ready?" I asked. Knowing readiness had nothing to do with it. She swallowed and nodded. "Let's end this." We had parked far from the cameras I'd identified earlier that evening. I'd memorized their angles during reconnaissance, mapped blind spots, counted seconds between sweeps. We wore dark clothing, not theatrical disguises, just enough to dissolve into shadow if someone glanced our way. When we stepped out of the truck, the concrete garage swallowed sound. Every footstep echoed more loudly than it should have. "Stay close," I murmured. "If something goes wrong, you run. Don't wait for me." "We both run," she said firmly. The service entrance door stood exactly as it had earlier, metal slab paint, chipped at the edges, propped slightly open by a wooden wedge left by maintenance. I eased it wider, pausing for the sound of alarms. None came. We slipped inside and closed it gently behind us. The corridor beyond smelled faintly of disinfectant and aging concrete. Emergency lighting cast a dull green tint across cinder-block walls. The cleaning crew had left minutes earlier. The building felt abandoned, hollow. I found the stairwell door solid steel, no glass panel, no visible camera. The kind of oversight common in older municipal buildings, upgraded piecemeal over decades. I pressed the handle slowly. The hinges creaked softly and Emma flinched. Inside the stairwell, the air was cooler. The only illumination came from exit signs glowing red at each landing. Our footsteps on the metal stairs sounded too loud in my ears, despite careful placement. Second floor. I paused, listening. Nothing but the low mechanical hum of ventilation and distant electrical current. Third floor. Emma's breathing was shallow beside me. I touched her shoulder briefly, grounding us both. Fourth floor. I approached the narrow wired glass window in the stairwell door and angled myself to minimize exposure. The corridor beyond was empty fluorescent lights humming overhead. 2 dome cameras were mounted near the elevator bank just as I'd observed. Their lenses pointed down the main stretch of hallway, not toward the stairwell alcove. This was the gap I'd counted on. I pushed the door open carefully. "Stay tight to the wall," I whispered. We moved along the corridor's edge where camera coverage thinned. Door numbers passed in sequence 408, 410, and then the corner where the hallway bent. Room 412 waited there, its brass nameplate reading Judith Carmichael, Deputy Director Property and Transfer. I knelt at the door while Emma stood watch. From my jacket pocket, I withdrew the tension wrench and pick I'd carried. Skills learned decades earlier on construction sites where you sometimes locked yourself out and couldn't afford a locksmith. "This won't take long," I breathed. The lock was commercial grade, but not specialized. 5 pins. I applied steady pressure, feeling for resistance through the metal. The first 2 pins clicked smoothly into place. The third resisted stubborn. Behind me, Emma's breath hitched. I froze. Footsteps faint somewhere beyond the bend in the hall. They passed, fading down another corridor. Not the measured pace of Carl's patrol. Likely someone exiting late. I resumed. The 4th pin gave, then the 5th. The wrench turned gently, and the bolt slid free with a soft metallic snap that sounded enormous in the quiet. I opened the door slowly. Darkness greeted us. I stepped inside first and eased it closed behind us. The air inside the office felt warmer, stale from hours of inactivity. I flicked on a small flashlight, keeping the beam low. The room was unremarkable. A tidy desk with a computer monitor, filing cabinets lining one wall, a coffee mug printed with a golden retriever, framed family photos, Judith beside a teenage boy who could only be a younger Adrian. Ordinary. That was what struck me hardest. Nothing in this room announced that lives had been methodically dismantled from this very desk. "I'll take physical files," I whispered. "You handle the system." Emma moved to the desk and crouched beside the computer tower. She powered it on. The monitor glowed blue, illuminating her face. Her fingers moved with practiced precision as she navigated login prompts. I tested the first filing cabinet drawer. Locked. I knelt again, working the simpler cabinet mechanism. It yielded faster than the door. The drawer slid open with a muted scrape. Folders were organized by year, labeled neatly with initials. I pulled 2020. Lauren King. Marriage certificate. Death certificate. Property transfers. Insurance payout documentation. Every form stamped and filed, indistinguishable from routine bureaucracy. I set my phone to silent capture mode and photographed each page rapidly. "Dad," Emma whispered urgently. "I'm in." There are spreadsheets, comprehensive logs, victim names, projected payouts, communications. "It's all here." "How much time?" I asked quietly. "Downloading now. I need 10 minutes minimum." I checked my watch. 11:28. Carl's patrol cycle would bring him upward soon. I opened 2017. Kayla Roberts. Same pattern. Same cold efficiency. Then 2014. Nicole Turner. Each file reduced a human life to columns of numbers and signatures. Emma's fingers flew across keys. "There are email chains linking to shell corporations," she said softly, "and metadata. I'm copying entire directories." "Grab everything," I replied. "No filtering." She inserted the USB drive. A small blinking light confirmed data transfer. I moved to a second cabinet. More recent folders. Pending cases. I flipped one open and saw new names, women not yet married to Adrian, but flagged for evaluation. Net worth estimates written in pen. I photographed every page. The room felt smaller by the second. The fluorescent ballast hummed overhead. Somewhere in the building, pipes shifted faintly. 6 minutes, Emma whispered. I moved to Judith's desk drawers. The top drawer held standard office supplies. The second contained a leather-bound notebook. Inside were handwritten notes, initials paired with dates, references to policy updates, reminders tied to payout schedules. I photographed each page. Copy complete. Emma breathed. Verifying integrity. I closed the cabinet drawer carefully, aligning it exactly as before. Clear browser history, she asked. No, I said. Leave it exactly as it was. We needed no evidence of tampering. I replaced folders in precise order, closed cabinets, wiped down surfaces lightly where we'd touched. Emma removed the USB drive and slipped it back into her pocket. I cracked the door open and listened. Silence. Move, I whispered. We slipped into the corridor, hugging the wall again. No footsteps, no voices. We reached the stairwell and entered quietly, closing the door without sound. Only when we descended 2 flights did I let out the breath I'd been holding. Our boots moved faster now, but still controlled. Second floor. First, service corridor. The door to the alley remained unlocked. We exited into cold night air and walked briskly but not hurriedly toward the garage entrance. Inside the truck, Emma closed her eyes briefly and pressed her forehead against the steering wheel. You got it, I asked. She nodded and pulled the USB drive from her pocket. Everything. I started the engine, heart pounding, not from exertion, but from proximity to disaster. As we drove out of the garage, the building loomed behind us, concrete and silent. For years, Judith had hidden behind those walls, behind procedure, behind paper. Tonight we had taken the paper with us, and this time it wouldn't stay buried. 12 minutes. That's all the time we had before Carl's patrol brought him to the 4th floor. 12 minutes to document years of ending lives and stealing fortunes. My hands moved faster than they had in decades. I pulled the first folder completely free, Lauren King, 2014. The marriage certificate was on top, looking official, until you knew what to look for. The notary stamp was slightly off-center, the kind of detail that wouldn't raise questions unless you were specifically looking for forgery. Beneath it, the death certificate cause of death listed as carbon monoxide poisoning from a faulty furnace. Then the property transfers, her grandmother's house in the suburbs, investment accounts, life insurance policies. Total value $425,000, all passing to Adrian Carmichael. I photographed every page with my phone, forcing my hands steady despite the adrenaline. Each document was a piece of a woman's life reduced to paperwork and profit. Behind me, Emma's fingers flew across the keyboard, the soft clicks punctuating the silence like a countdown timer. I moved to the next folder. Kayla Roberts, 2017. Marriage certificate, death certificate this time, a hiking accident on Mount Rainier. Property transfer documents, $380,000. More notes in Judith's handwriting, detailing which stamps she'd used, which documents required backdating, which officials had signed off without looking too closely. Dad, Emma's whisper was tight with shock. I'm in the main database. There's a spreadsheet. Projects.xlsx. I glanced over while sliding out the third folder. Emma's face was illuminated by the monitor's blue glow, her eyes wide. It's not just 3 victims, she breathed. There are preliminary research files on 6 other women. Women with assets, women who fit the profile. She's been hunting. Nicole Turner, 2020. The pattern repeated marriage death by prescription overdose property transfer. $315,000. Judith's notes were more detailed here, including copies of the forged prescription forms, documentation of how she'd backdated the paperwork to make everything appear legitimate. $1.12 million stolen from 3 dead women documented in neat folders like they were just another day at the office. Copy everything, I said quietly. Multiple backups. Emma's USB drive was already working. Uploading to Dropbox and Google Drive. Multiple accounts. Even if they find one, we'll have copies. I checked my watch, 11:35 p.m., 5 minutes before Carl would be at the elevator pressing the button for the 4th floor. I photographed the last pages of Nicole's folder, Judith's step-by-step notes on how to process fraudulent death certificates, which county offices had lax verification procedures, which stamps could be forged with simple tools ordered online. It was the instruction manual for murder filed away like a recipe collection. 87%, Emma whispered, watching the upload progress bar. 92%. I carefully returned the folders to their exact positions, making sure the tabs aligned perfectly. Any sign of disturbance and Judith would know someone had been here. There's more, Emma said, her voice shaking slightly. A folder called Future Targets. 4 women in Seattle. Names, addresses, net worth calculations, relationship status. She's been researching them. Is your name? No, not yet. Emma's fingers flew across the keyboard, taking screenshots. But these women… Dad, we have to warn them. After we're done with Judith, we have to… We will. I moved to stand behind her, watching the screen. 4 photographs, 4 profiles. Women going about their lives unaware that someone was calculating their worth and planning their ends. 96%, Emma reported. Almost there. I scanned the office one final time, making sure everything was exactly as we'd found it. The coffee mug with the golden retriever, the family photos, the neat stacks of paperwork. No sign that we'd been here, except for the files now uploading to cloud servers across the internet. 98%, 99. My watch showed 11:38. 2 minutes until Carl reached this floor. We needed to be in that stairwell moving down and away before he stepped out of the elevator. 100%, Emma breathed. It's backed up. Multiple copies. They can't erase this. She ejected the USB drive, shut down the computer properly, no sudden power-offs that might leave traces in the system logs. I gathered my tools, returned them to my pocket. Everything had to look undisturbed, unremarkable. Let's go, I said. But Emma had frozen at the computer, her hand still on the mouse, staring at the screen. Dad. Her voice was barely audible. There's one more file. Judith's personal notes. Not in the projects folder. Hidden in a subfolder labeled Insurance. Emma, we're out of time. It's about Declan Mercer. That stopped me. I moved to see the screen. The file was a detailed dossier. Decades of information on Declan Mercer compiled methodically, obsessively. Money laundering operations in 3 states. Names of victims going back 15 years, well before Judith had started working with Adrian. Financial records showing Declan's cut from various projects, totaling millions. Contact information for law enforcement agencies, federal investigators, journalists who'd covered similar cases. Judith wasn't just working for Declan Mercer. She was building a case against him. This is… Emma scrolled through page after page. This is everything. Bank accounts, property holdings, aliases he's used. She's been documenting his entire operation. If this got out, Declan would go to prison for life. Or if Declan found out she had this, I said slowly, he'd make sure she never had the chance to use it. Emma looked up at me, horror and understanding mingling in her expression. She's planning to betray him, take him down and eliminate her competition at the same time. I checked my watch, 11:39, 1 minute. Copy it, I said. Fast. Emma's fingers flew. The file was large years of compiled evidence, but she managed to save it to the USB drive in 40 seconds. The longest 40 seconds of my life. Done, she said, ejecting the drive. We moved to the door. I eased it open, checked the corridor. Empty. The elevator display showed Carl on the 3rd floor ascending. Go, I whispered. We slipped out of room 412, leaving everything exactly as we'd found it. Everything except the digital copies, now stored in 3 separate cloud accounts on a USB drive in Emma's pocket and backed up to my phone. We'd come for evidence of Judith's crimes. We were leaving with something far more dangerous, proof that could start a war between 2 criminals, each with everything to lose. The stairwell door closed behind us just as we heard the elevator chime. We almost made it. The evidence was backed up. The room looked untouched, and we were 10 seconds from the door when I heard footsteps in the corridor. Not Carl's steady patrol rhythm. These were faster, purposeful, angry. They stopped outside room 412. I grabbed Emma's arm and pulled her behind the desk. We crouched, barely breathing. Beneath the door, 2 shadows blocked the hallway light. The handle turned. Fluorescence snapped on, blinding. Adrian Carmichael stood in the doorway. Carl was beside him, stiff in his security uniform hand, hovering near his radio. Motion sensors. Patrick. Adrian's voice was stripped of charm, cold and precise. 4th floor triggered 20 minutes ago. Did you think I wouldn't monitor my own building? I stepped out, shielding where Emma hid. Stay away from my daughter. Adrian's smile was thin as wire. Your daughter, she's my wife. Legally, what's hers is mine. You're the criminal who broke into a government office. He glanced at Carl. Isn't that right? Carl shifted uneasily. Mr. Carmichael, should I call the police? Not yet. Adrian's eyes stayed on me. Let's see what they thought they could steal. We didn't steal anything, I said, backing toward the desk. No. He entered the room with calm, rehearsed grace. Then why break into my mother's office in the middle of the night? His gaze flicked past me. Where is she, Patrick? Where's Emma? Emma rose from behind the desk. For a heartbeat, surprise cracked his mask. Then it returned. I'm right here, she said, voice steady. And I know exactly what you are. His face softened into concern, so convincing it might have fooled anyone else. Emma, sweetheart, whatever your father told you. Lauren King, she cut in. Kayla Roberts, Nicole Turner. Should I keep going? The mask shattered. What remained was pure calculation. No remorse, no hesitation. Carl, Adrian said quietly. Lock the door. Carl hesitated. Sir, I don't think. Lock the door. Training overrode instinct. The lock clicked. Emma, run, I shouted. She bolted toward the emergency exit behind Judith's desk, the fire escape I'd spotted earlier. Adrian lunged to intercept her. I stepped into him. We collided hard. He was younger, stronger, but I'd spent decades hauling concrete and lumber. I drove him backward into a filing cabinet. It tipped. Folders spilled in a cascade. Lauren, Kayla, Nicole, years of meticulous planning scattered across the floor. Carl grabbed my arm. Sir, please. I shoved him off. Stay out of it. Emma slammed the crash bar on the emergency door. The alarm detonated into sound, a deafening shriek. Emergency lights strobed down the corridor. Go, I yelled. She disappeared through the exit. I followed. Behind us, Adrian shouted, but the alarm swallowed his words. The stairwell exploded with flashing light and echoing noise. Emma flew down the metal steps 2 at a time. I followed, gripping the railing, clutching my phone, our photographed evidence secured inside it. Above us, the stairwell door burst open. Adrian's voice echoed down, stripped of charm. "You can run, Patrick, but you can't hide. You can't escape me. You can't escape Declan. We'll find you." His words fractured in the siren's howl as we burst through the ground floor exit into the parking garage. Emma sprinted to my truck, yanking open the passenger door. I hit the key fob. The engine roared. We were moving before the doors fully shut, tires screeching as I took the turn too fast. In the rearview mirror, Adrian emerged at the garage entrance phone, to his ear face twisted with fury under fluorescent glare. He was calling someone. Declan, Judith, the police. Emma's breathing was ragged. Her hands shook as she checked her phone. The backup completed. Everything's uploaded. Multiple copies. I merged into late-night traffic, checking mirrors constantly. No headlights yet, but that wouldn't last. Adrian had seen the files. He knew we had proof. He'd call Declan, call Judith. They'd all know. "Dad." Emma's voice was small. "What do we do now?" I thought about the files stored across cloud servers, about Adrian's call, about the hornet's nest we just kicked, 2 separate swarms, both lethal. "Now," I said, forcing calm into my voice, "we make sure the whole world sees it before they can stop us." Downtown Seattle shrank in the rearview mirror. Somewhere behind us, Adrian Carmichael was mobilizing whatever resources he had left. Declan Mercer was likely learning that his operation had been exposed. Judith Carmichael would soon discover her office had been breached. The hunt had begun. And this time we weren't just running. We were carrying the truth. We drove for 20 minutes, taking random turns through Seattle's late-night streets, until I was certain no one was following. When we finally pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour diner on the city's outskirts, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn off the engine. Nancy, the name on her tag, identified her as the night shift waitress, looked about 50, her kind face weathered by years of long shifts. She poured coffee without being asked, movements efficient and practiced. We slid into a corner booth. I took the seat with my back to the wall so I could watch the entrance. Old habits from construction jobs in rough neighborhoods. Always know your exits. Emma stared at her phone, the glow lighting her exhausted face. "Dad, it's blowing up." 15 missed calls from Adrian. 10 from a number I don't recognize. "Don't answer." The coffee burned my tongue, but I drank it anyway, needing something solid. "We need to think. Think about what." Her voice trembled with exhaustion and fear. "They know we have the evidence. Declan gave you until 7 a.m. That's 6 hours. Adrian knows we know. Judith will see her office in the morning. We can't keep running." I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the photos. Lauren King's marriage certificate, Kayla Roberts' death certificate, Nicole Turner's property transfers. Years of calculated theft and planning, now backed up across cloud servers. "What if we just send it to the police?" Emma asked. "Declan has connections. Judith works inside the system. She's been processing fraudulent paperwork for years without getting caught. They'll bury the evidence or bury us before it sticks." Silence settled heavy between us. Around the diner, life continued. A truck driver at the counter nursing his coffee. A young couple holding hands in a booth. A group of nurses laughing over pie. Ordinary people living ordinary lives while we sat with proof of multiple deaths and no clear way to use it. Nancy returned with the pot. "You two all right? Looks like one hell of a night." "We're trying to figure something out," I said carefully. She smiled kindly. "Well, I hope you got people on your side. World's a scary place to face alone." Her words lingered after she moved on. Emma was absently scrolling when she suddenly froze. "Dad, what? What if Nancy's right? About what? People on our side." She turned her phone toward me. "Last year, a whistleblower live-streamed corporate fraud. Thousands watched in real time. The company couldn't bury it because too many people saw. Something clicked. Live stream, witnesses. Declan couldn't intimidate everyone. Judith couldn't rewrite records already broadcast to thousands. We don't choose between Declan and Judith, I said slowly. We expose both. Live. In front of everyone. Emma's eyes brightened for the first time that night. They can't silence 10,000 people. Or 50,000. If we go public fast enough, it's unstoppable. I pulled out my phone and opened Facebook, an app Emma had set up for me years ago, so I could see her photos. I've never done this. I have. She slid beside me and began tapping across the screen with confident speed. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We can stream to all of them. Multi-platform. When you go live, I'll share it from my accounts. We tell everyone to share it. We make it viral. She configured the stream settings, explained viewer counts, comments, shares. Her UX design training made her fluent in a language I barely spoke. When I asked, she checked the time. 1 a.m. now, before Declan's deadline, before Adrian organizes anything. She hesitated. We go back to that building, confront Judith, with the world watching. She might call the police. Good. Her jaw set in a way that reminded me of her mother. Let her. Let Adrian show up. Let Declan try to stop us. Every second will be recorded. They can't make us disappear if everyone's watching. I looked at my daughter, brave enough to walk back into danger for proof, exhausted but unbroken. Your mother would be proud, I said quietly. Emma's eyes filled, but she smiled. She'd probably say we're both crazy. She'd be right. I left cash on the table, enough to cover coffee and a generous tip for Nancy, whose offhand advice had sparked this plan. Let's go be crazy. Back in the truck, Emma finalized the setup, testing signal strength, ensuring backups were recording. When you start, just talk. Tell them who you are, what happened. Show the evidence. I'll record on my phone too and push the stream everywhere. My finger hovered over the go live button. Ready? She asked. I thought about Lauren, Kayla, Nicole, about Amanda's scar, about Emma's name on a spreadsheet with a dollar amount beside it. I pressed the button. The viewer count jumped from 0 to 10, 50, 200. Our faces appeared on screen, framed by the dim interior of the truck. My name is Patrick Lawson, I said, voice steadier than I felt. 3 weeks ago, my daughter Emma married a man named Adrian Carmichael. What we didn't know is that he's done this before. Tonight, we're going to show you proof. If anything happens to us, you're all witnesses. 500 viewers? 800. Comments flooded in. What? Share this, call the police recording. Is this real? Emma met my eyes. I saw her mother's courage there. We were committed now. No turning back. Driving back to the building we'd barely escaped felt like insanity. But with 5,000 people watching our live stream, with comments flooding in, urging us to stay safe, and we're calling 911 and share this. For the first time since this nightmare began, we weren't alone. The viewer count climbed as I drove. 8,000. 10,000. Emma monitored her phone's second screen, watching shares multiply across platforms. I kept my phone mounted on the dashboard, camera facing me. We're going back, I said to the lens, to the thousands of strangers who'd become our witnesses. Ornizon Naust, Judith Carmichael, works on the 4th floor of the City Records building. She's forged documents for years, helping her son Adrian Carmichael end women's lives and steal their money. The comments scrolled past faster than I could read. This is insane. Someone screen record this. Calling Seattle PD now. Share, share, share. 12,000 viewers. We pulled up in front of the building. Lights blazed on the 4th floor. Judith was still there, probably destroying evidence after Adrian's panicked call about our break-in. Show them the evidence, I said to Emma. She held up her phone to my camera, cycling through the photos we'd taken. Lauren King's forged marriage certificate. Kayla Roberts's falsified death report. Nicole Turner's manipulated property transfers. Each document appeared on screen for millions of pixels to capture and preserve. We entered through the main entrance this time. No sneaking, no shadows. This was public. Carl stood behind his security desk, his face registering shock as we walked in. "Mr. Lawson, you can't—" I turned my camera toward him. "This is Carl building security. Carl, 12,000 people are watching right now. We're going up to the 4th floor." Carl's eyes went to the phone, to the little red recording indicator to my face. I saw the calculation happen in real time, physically stopping us while thousands watched, versus letting us pass and claiming he'd been overwhelmed. He stepped aside. The elevator ride up felt eternal. Emma read comments aloud, her voice steady despite her shaking hands. "Someone says the FBI's getting involved." Another person tagged the Seattle Police Department. "Local news stations are being notified." 15,000 viewers. The elevator chimed. 4th floor. The corridor stretched ahead of us, fluorescent lights humming their familiar tune. Room 412's door stood ajar, light spilling into the hallway. From inside came the mechanical whir of a paper shredder working overtime. I pushed the door open, camera first. Judith Carmichael stood at her shredder, feeding documents into its mechanical teeth. Papers littered the floor around her, torn folders, scattered photographs, the desperate detritus of someone trying to erase their crimes. She looked up at the sound of our entrance. Her eyes found the camera, found the little red light. Her face went pale. "What are you doing?" Her voice was small, tight with fear. "My 15,000 people are watching this, Judith." I kept my voice calm, steady. "Want to tell them about Lauren King." Get out." She tried for authority, but it came out shrill. "This is private property. You're trespassing. I'll call the police." "Please do." Emma stepped forward, her phone raised to show Judith the screen. 15,000 witnesses, all of them recording. My name was supposed to be next, wasn't it? Emma Lawson. Target number 4. Judith's eyes darted between us. The camera's the door. Trapped. Kayla Roberts. Emma continued, her voice hard. "Nicole Turner, should I keep going?" Judith lunged for my phone. I stepped back, keeping the camera steady as she stumbled forward. You can't do this." True panic now, her composure shredding as fast as the papers she'd been destroying. "You don't understand what you're—" "To everyone watching," I said, addressing the camera, the thousands of faces I couldn't see but knew were there. Judith Carmichael has been forging government documents for years. Her son, Adrian Carmichael, has ended 3 women's lives over the past decade. We have evidence, marriage certificates, death records, property transfers, all of it falsified. It's backed up in multiple cloud locations. "Judith," I turned to face her directly. "It's over." She was shaking now. Actually shaking, her carefully maintained facade crumbling. "You don't understand. Declan Mercer will—" She stopped. Her eyes went wide, fixed on something behind me. I heard them then. Footsteps in the corridor. Not Carl's uncertain shuffle. Not Adrian's angry rush. These were measured, confident, unhurried. The footsteps of someone who controlled situations rather than reacting to them. A voice I recognized. Henry Foster's voice, but stripped of its elderly tremor, deeper and stronger, spoke from the doorway. "Yes, Judith. Please do tell them about Declan Mercer." I turned, keeping my camera steady. 18,000 viewers now. 18,000 witnesses. The man in the doorway looked like the elderly stranger who'd pressed a warning note into my hand at that restaurant 3 weeks ago. But the way he stood, the way he moved, the cold calculation in his eyes, this wasn't a frightened old man trying to save lives. This was the predator who'd taught Adrian Carmichael everything he knew. "Hello, Patrick." Declan Mercer dropped all pretense, his voice smooth and professional. His eyes found the camera, assessed the little red light, the viewer count visible on my screen. "I trust we have an audience." Behind me, Judith made a small, strangled sound. 18,000 and climbing. Emma said, her voice steadier than mine would have been. Declan smiled, not the warm smile of Henry Foster, but something colder, more calculating. He stepped fully into the room, and I saw he wasn't alone. Two men followed him, their suits expensive, their faces impassive. Not muscle exactly, more like attorneys or accountants. The kind of people who made problems disappear with paperwork rather than violence. Excellent! Declan's eyes swept the room, Judith frozen by her shredder Emma, with her backup camera me with my live stream. Then I suppose it's time we all had an honest conversation. He looked directly into my camera, into the eyes of 18,000 strangers, and smiled. My name is Declan Mercer, and I believe Judith and I have quite a story to tell you. Declan Mercer had just walked into that room in front of 18,000 people watching live. There was no turning back now. What he said next would change everything. But before I continue, comment, I'm still here if you're still watching, or type truth. If you believe everything is about to come into the light, I need to know you're still with me. And a quick note. The next part includes a few dramatized elements added for storytelling and educational impact. If that's not for you, feel free to stop here, no judgment at all. But if you're ready to see what Declan said next, let's go back to that moment. The illusion was gone. The trembling old man who had slipped that folded warning into my hand in a candlelit restaurant no longer existed. In his place stood the architect of something far darker, composed, controlled, and radiating the quiet authority of a man who had operated without consequence for 15 years. Declan Mercer stepped into Judith's office as if he owned it, three men moving in perfect formation beside him. Cole Jake and Nick tailored suits, polished shoes, discreet watches that cost more than my truck. They didn't look like enforcers. They looked like accountants, attorneys, consultants. The kind of men who erased problems with contracts and shell corporations instead of fists. I kept my phone raised, camera steady lens fixed on Declan's face. 20,000 people are watching right now, Declan, I said evenly. Go ahead. Say hello. He glanced at the screen, saw the viewer count climbing in the corner, and a faint crease formed between his brows. But the confidence never left his posture. That was his flaw. He didn't understand the permanence of digital witnesses. 20,000, he repeated lightly, almost amused. Impressive, Patrick. But you're still thinking too small. Judith, who had been standing near her desk with a half-shredded folder in her hand, opened her mouth. Declan, what exactly are you? Quiet, Judith. He didn't even look at her. The dismissal was effortless, practiced. Your little side project is finished. Then he turned fully toward me, and by extension, toward the thousands of people watching from their phones and living rooms and offices across the city and beyond. You performed beautifully, Patrick. He continued smoothly. The outraged father, desperate to protect his daughter. I gave you exactly what you needed. The address, the victim names, the pattern. Just enough to dismantle Judith's credibility and dismantle her operation without any trail leading back to me. Emma's voice cut through tight with anger. You used us. Declan tilted his head slightly, as though she had just pointed out something obvious. Of course I did. Judith's incompetence was beginning to attract federal scrutiny. That's bad for business. I required her removal, but it had to appear organic. Enter Patrick Lawson, clean record, no criminal ties, acting purely from paternal instinct. Perfect. The viewer count ticked upward in the corner of my screen. 25,438, 27,102, 28,600. You're confessing, I said calmly, in front of nearly 30,000 people. He actually laughed, not forced, genuinely entertained. Confessing, no, Patrick. Explaining. There's a distinction. He walked to Judith's desk, picked up one of the folders she had tried to destroy earlier, flipped it open with mild contempt, then dropped it back down. Judith's model was crude. 4 women eliminated for less than $1 million total. Messy. obvious, predictable. The kind of amateurism that draws unwanted attention. He faced the camera again. My operations are larger, cleaner, corporate. I generate 2 to 3 million annually, and I've done so for 15 years without appearing on a single FBI radar. I angled the phone closer to his face. For everyone watching, Declan Mercer just admitted to running organized criminal operations for over a decade. He waved his hand dismissively. And what exactly will your viewers do, Patrick? Call the police? His smile sharpened. I have relationships throughout Seattle PD, contacts in city offices, friends in state agencies. You think I've survived this long without insurance, without protection? The viewer count climbed again. 34,604. 31,119. 32,847. Judith made a short, brittle sound that might have been a laugh. Declan's head snapped toward her. You find something amusing? He asked quietly. You arrogant fool, she said, her voice low but edged like glass. You really believe Patrick was the only one collecting leverage? I've been building a file on you for 2 years. Bank accounts, property transfers, offshore holdings, the names of your other contractors. I knew eventually you'd try to cut me loose. I made sure you couldn't do it cleanly. She gestured toward my phone. Everything you just said, it's recorded. By more than 30,000 people. For the first time, Declan truly looked at the screen, not just a glance, but a calculation. He registered the numbers, the scrolling comments, the live reactions. 32,847 had become 34,210. What is this? He demanded. Live stream. Emma answered, her voice steady now, almost calm. Simultaneous broadcast. Facebook, Instagram, X. Every word you've said has gone out in real time. Thousands of people have watched you describe your operations. Thousands have seen your face. Declan's expression shifted. The composed executive evaporated, replaced by something stripped and volatile. Turn that off, he ordered. Now. He stepped toward me, arm extending for the phone. Cole and Jake moved with him, flanking instinctively. I retreated a single step, keeping the frame steady, ensuring his face filled the screen. 35,000 people, I said quietly. And you just confirmed everything. His jaw tightened. His eyes moved rapidly. Door, window, Judith, my phone, his men. For the first time since he entered the room, he looked uncertain. Then the sound cut through the building. Sirens. Not distant. Not singular. A chorus. Approaching from multiple directions. Cole's hand landed on Declan's arm. We need to move, he muttered urgently. Now. Emma had already moved toward the window. Dad, she whispered, astonishment in her tone. Look. I joined, her phone still raised. 4 floors below the street blazed with red and blue light. Patrol cars lined both sides of the building. Sheriff units, unmarked vehicles. I recognized federal plates from prior construction contracts. 35,000 viewers, Emma murmured. How many do you think called 911? All of them, I replied. More sirens layered in. A helicopter beam swept across the facade of the building, bright white light cutting through darkness. On my screen, the comment feed was a flood. Police are there. FBI just arrived. He can't escape. We're recording this too. Declan stood motionless for a split second, watching the reflection of flashing lights flicker across the walls. 15 years of meticulous control undone in less than 10 minutes of arrogance. You did this, he said, his voice hollow now. No, I answered without lowering the phone. You did. I just made sure it was visible. Below us, I heard the main entrance doors slam open. Boots struck tile in coordinated rhythm. The sound carried up through the stairwell, decisive, organized, trained. Declan's empire wasn't collapsing in secrecy. It was collapsing in full view. Cole stepped back instinctively. Jake's composure cracked entirely. Nick looked toward the emergency exit as if calculating odds. The stairwell door at the end of the hall burst open. Tactical officers poured into the corridor in controlled formation, weapons raised but disciplined voices clear and authoritative. Seattle police, nobody move. Red laser dots danced across tailored suits. Declan's shoulders sagged just barely. Enough. His men froze. Judith stood rigid near her desk, silent. I kept the camera trained on Declan's face as officers closed in and secured wrists with practiced efficiency. The viewer count surged past 40,000. The comments continued to cascade. Justice. He's done. We saw it all. Declan met my gaze one last time as they pulled him back. For 15 years, he had believed himself untouchable, invisible, protected by influence and precision. He had underestimated only one thing: witnesses, and in the end, it wasn't force that brought him down. It was exposure. For 15 years, Declan Mercer had operated behind layers of distance shell companies, intermediaries, corrupt officials who signed papers without asking questions. He had built insulation around himself so thick that no accusation ever touched him directly. It took less than 5 minutes of unchecked arrogance in front of a live camera to strip all of it away. He stared at my phone screen at the viewer count climbing in the corner, 38,293 and rising. I watched the change in his expression in real time. Confidence drained first, then calculation, and finally something that looked dangerously close to disbelief. I didn't lower the phone. I didn't let my voice waver. To everyone watching, I said clearly, Declan Mercer just admitted to running organized criminal operations in Seattle for 15 years. Judith Carmichael forged official government records and helped facilitate the deaths of multiple women, including those targeted by her son, Adrian Carmichael. All evidence has been secured and backed up in multiple locations. The comment feed moved too fast to read in full. FBI has been called. Screen recording. Sharing this everywhere. Declan's jaw tightened. His gaze snapped toward Cole. Get that phone. Cole took a step forward, but I was already moving backward toward the door, keeping Declan centered in frame. Emma stayed tight at my side shoulder, brushing mine. You touch us. Emma said, her voice steady and controlled, and 40,000 people will see exactly what you do. Jake and Nick hesitated. They looked at the screen, looked at the flashing viewer count, looked at the comments. They understood something Declan had been too arrogant to grasp. This wasn't a private confrontation. This was permanent. Judith began laughing. It wasn't loud, but it cut through the room, high, brittle, almost hysterical. We're all finished, she said. Every last one of us. Shut up, Judith. Declan snapped, control slipping. 15 years. Declan, she continued, her smile twisted. 15 years, hiding behind everyone else. And you destroy yourself in 5 minutes. Outside, the sirens were no longer distant. They were right beneath us. Through the window, the street pulsed red and blue as 24 emergency vehicles flooded the block. Doors slammed. Radios crackled. Commands echoed upward. Then came the heavy footsteps in the stairwell, coordinated, rapid, unmistakable. Declan's composure fractured. This isn't over, he said, voice tight. I have attorneys. I have leverage. You had leverage, I interrupted calmly. Now you have 50,000 witnesses. The door burst inward. Seattle police, hands where we can see them. Officer Johnson led the tactical entry, weapon raised, but controlled Sergeant Cooper directly behind him. More officers poured in, spreading through the office with disciplined precision. Declan Mercer, Sergeant Cooper demanded. Declan's face cycled through fury, calculation, defeat. Then finally something colder, resignation. Slowly, deliberately, he raised his hands. Cole's went up instantly. Jake and Nick followed without protest. Judith lifted hers too, though she was still smiling in that strange, bitter way. Patrick Lawson, Emma Lawson, Officer Johnson located us near the window. That's us, I answered. Still live streaming. 53,000 watching. Johnson nodded sharply. We've received hundreds of calls. FBI notified. Units are en route. Sergeant Cooper stepped in front of Declan and snapped handcuffs around his wrists. Declan Mercer and Judith Carmichael, you are under arrest for conspiracy extortion accessory to multiple counts of homicide. He continued reading rights as officers secured Judith. Then Cole, Jake, and Nick. I didn't stop filming. For everyone watching, I narrated Declan Mercer, Judith Carmichael, and 3 associates, Cole, Jake, and Nick, are now in custody. Officer Johnson turned to me. Mr. Lawson, are there additional individuals involved? Adrian Carmichael, I said immediately. Judith's son. His apartment, I gave the address. Johnson relayed it into his radio without hesitation. Units already moving, came the reply. Emma leaned into me slightly, the tension finally draining from her posture. Dad, she whispered, is it really over? Declan, escorted toward the door in handcuffs, stopped for half a second and turned his head toward us. His eyes weren't wild. They weren't panicked. They were focused. You think you won, he said quietly. His voice had lost its polish. It sounded colder now. You just made yourself visible. Everyone who worked for me, everyone whose operations you exposed, they all know your names now. Sergeant Cooper tugged his arm. Keep moving. But the words lingered in the air like smoke. Officer Johnson stepped closer to us. Mr. Lawson, we need you and your daughter to accompany us. We'll need full statements, and we'll need to ensure your safety. He glanced at my phone again, where the viewer count had crossed 60,000. Mercer's network is broader than this room. Until we secure everyone tied to him, you're both considered at risk. I looked at Emma. Exhaustion lined her face, but so did strength. Then I looked at Declan being led away, his associates following in cuffs. Judith still wore that strange smile, as if even defeat carried some twisted satisfaction. The live stream continued. 60,000 people were watching. Messages flooded in, asking if we were safe, thanking us, promising to keep sharing the video. I had wanted witnesses. Now I had more than I ever imagined. But Declan was right about one thing. Exposure cut both ways. His empire had fallen in front of millions, and in the process, our faces had been broadcast just as widely. We'll come with you, I told Officer Johnson. Then I turned the camera slightly toward myself and Emma. We're safe. Law enforcement has secured the scene. Thank you to everyone watching, to everyone who called, to everyone who refused to look away. Before I could end the stream, Johnson's radio crackled loudly. All units, we have visual on Adrian Carmichael. Subject attempting to flee on foot. Pursuit underway. Emma's breath caught. Declan, halfway through the doorway, paused again. This time he didn't speak. He simply looked at us. There was no rage in his eyes now. No panic. Just something measured and deliberate. A promise that this moment for him was not the end, but the beginning of something else. Then he disappeared down the hallway, in handcuffs, red and blue lights flickering across his suit as officers escorted him out. The stream was still live, and the world was still watching. The interrogation room at the Seattle Police Department was nothing like the ones on television. There were no dramatic shadows or mirrored walls, just unforgiving fluorescent lights, a metal table bolted to the floor, paper cups filled with bitter coffee, and Detective Walsh asking the same questions over and over in slightly different ways to see if our answers shifted. Start from the beginning, Walsh said again, folding his hands on the table. His voice was calm but precise. He looked like a man in his mid-40s who had seen enough of humanity's worst impulses to no longer be surprised by them. The restaurant. Every detail. So we told it again. The night Emma and I had gone to dinner. The man who appeared elderly but wasn't. The folded note pressed into my hand. The address scribbled at the bottom. The house in southeast Seattle. Henry Foster, who had revealed himself as Declan Mercer. Amanda Foster alive when the world believed she was dead. Judith Carmichael's office and the files documenting years of fraud, forged transfers, and calculated deaths. Adrian's timeline. The hiking accident scheduled for my daughter. The live stream that had captured Declan's arrogance and confession in front of tens of thousands. Walsh listened without interrupting, occasionally jotting notes. His expression never gave anything away. When we finished, he leaned back in his chair. The live stream, he said slowly, was reckless, but it was brilliant. 60,000 live witnesses means Mercer's legal team can't spin this. No coercion claims. No edited tape defense. It's raw, uncut, timestamped. He turned his laptop toward us. The video had already surpassed 2 million views. News networks were rebroadcasting clips. Legal commentators were analyzing every word Declan had spoken. FBI is involved, Walsh continued. The district attorney is drafting formal charges. Conspiracy, extortion, fraud, accessory to multiple counts of murder. Judith Carmichael is facing similar charges, along with forgery of government documents and obstruction. He paused briefly. We picked up Adrian Carmichael at 2:47 a.m. He was packing. Emma exhaled slowly, as if she'd been holding that breath since the cafe. He's being charged with 3 counts of murder and conspiracy, Walsh added. The files from Judith's office sealed it. Dates, financial transfers, correspondence. Lauren King, Kayla Roberts, Nicole Turner. Their families will finally know what happened. Another detective stepped in with an evidence log confirming that the photos, digital copies, and files we'd secured were cataloged and locked in custody. You two put yourselves in serious danger, Walsh said. That kind of risk leaves a mark. But what you did, it mattered. Amanda, I asked. She's here, he replied, giving her statement. She requested to see you. 20 minutes later, Amanda walked into the room. She looked exhausted, her eyes red from lack of sleep, but there was something steady in her posture now. Something lighter. You did it, she said softly. Emma stood and hugged her without hesitation. Watching them, I realized they were both survivors in different ways. Both had faced the same man. Both had chosen not to disappear. Lauren, Kayla. Nicole, Amanda whispered. Their families will finally have justice. Walsh addressed her gently. Witness protection has extended an offer if you want it. Mercer's network is wider than we initially believed, but we're dismantling it quickly. By 4 a.m, Walsh updated us again. 7 additional arrests tied to Declan Mercer's financial network. Associates identified through bank trails and shell companies listed in Judith's files. A criminal structure 15 years in the making was collapsing in hours. By 5 a.m, federal agents were seizing Judith's office downtown and raiding properties Declan had operated under alternate identities, including the very house where he'd once played the grieving father. You can head home, Walsh finally said. We'll assign patrol to your neighborhood for a few days. Mercer made threats on record. We don't ignore those. When we stepped outside, dawn was just beginning to push against the night. The sky shifted from deep black to muted blue. The city was waking up, unaware that something massive had shifted overnight. News vans lined the street. Reporters spotted us immediately. Mr. Lawson, Emma. Why did you live stream it? Were you afraid for your lives? What message do you want people to hear? Officers formed a protective path and guided us toward my truck. We didn't answer. We didn't need to. The footage spoke for itself. Once inside, Emma leaned her head against the window. Dad, she asked quietly, is it really over? I thought about Declan's final expression, about his reach, about the possibility that someone else in his network might hold a grudge. But I also thought about 60,000 people who had witnessed his confession live, about millions more who had watched afterward, about federal indictments already underway. Yes, I said at last. It's over. You're safe. She closed her eyes and fell asleep before we reached the freeway. My phone buzzed nonstop during the drive, messages from former co-workers, old friends, men I'd framed houses with decades ago. Some were stunned. Some angry. Most were proud. One message stood out. Amanda, Thank you for believing, for fighting, for not giving up. You gave me back something I thought I'd lost forever. I stared at it for a long time before saving it. I didn't know how to respond. By the time we pulled into our driveway, the sun was fully up. Emma stirred as I shut off the engine, blinking in brief confusion before memory returned. "We're home," I said gently. Inside the house looked exactly the same. The photos Sarah had chosen still lined the hallway. The kitchen table still bore faint scratches from projects I'd built over the years. Everything was unchanged, and yet everything felt different. 3 weeks earlier, Emma had been a newlywed, imagining a future. Now she was something else entirely. A survivor who had walked into the jaws of a predator and come back stronger. I had learned something too. Being a father doesn't always mean shielding your child from every threat. Sometimes it means standing beside them when the threat appears. Sometimes it means admitting you almost missed the warning signs. Later that week, I sat in my living room with morning coffee watching coverage of Declan Mercer's arraignment. Seeing him in an orange jumpsuit, hands cuffed, facing life in prison, it felt surreal. The man who once believed himself untouchable now stood before a judge stripped of influence. The nightmare was finished, but the lessons were permanent. Emma stopped by that morning. She looked steadier, the haunted look in her eyes beginning to soften. We talked openly about the red flags I had nearly ignored. He insisted on handling all the paperwork, I admitted. I should have questioned that. "We moved too fast," she said. 3 weeks from meeting to marriage. "I wanted you happy so badly," I said quietly, that I convinced myself my instincts were just paranoia. She squeezed my hand. "But when it mattered, you trusted them." "I almost didn't," I confessed. "That's what scares me." She leaned her head on my shoulder, just like she used to when she was a little girl afraid of thunderstorms. "But you did. And now I know something important. When I face something terrifying, I don't have to face it alone." I wrapped my arm around her. "Neither do I said softly. "Neither do I. And to you, listening to this story, I want to leave you with something real, something stripped of drama and headlines and sirens. I'm not a hero. I'm not extraordinary. I'm a father who almost ignored his instincts because I didn't want to disrupt my daughter's happiness. I wanted so badly to see her married, secure, and loved that I nearly convinced myself the unease in my chest was just overprotectiveness. That's the part that still unsettles me. The danger wasn't only the man she married. The danger was how close I came to doubting what I knew deep down. If you take anything from this, let it be this: don't silence your instincts simply because the truth is inconvenient. Don't rationalize away red flags because the surface looks polished. In every family story, the warning signs are present. Sometimes they whisper. Sometimes they hide behind charm. Sometimes they show up in paperwork, in timelines that move too fast, in control disguised as care. But they are there. And in so many grandpa stories, we speak about wisdom like it's a gift that automatically arrives with gray hair. It isn't. Wisdom is only useful when you're willing to act on it. I thank God that I listened that night. I thank God that fear did not overpower responsibility. And I thank God that my daughter is alive to write her own future. Without God's guidance, I might have chosen peace over confrontation. Without God's protection, this story could have ended in silence instead of justice. Faith doesn't erase danger. It doesn't make the world safe by default. But God steadies your hands when they tremble. God clears your mind when confusion clouds judgment. God gives courage when comfort tempts you to stay quiet. And sometimes that clarity, just that one moment of clarity, is what separates tragedy from survival. What I believe now is simple evil thrives where people refuse to look closely. It grows in silence. It feeds on politeness and denial. Secrets are a predator's shield. Exposure is the only antidote. When something feels wrong in your own family story, don't wait for undeniable proof. Ask questions early. Read the documents carefully. Notice patterns. Protect the people you love, before someone else exploits your hesitation. I learned the hard way that being agreeable can be dangerous, that avoiding conflict can create space for harm. Love should never require blindness. Trust should never demand the surrender of reason. If this feels like one of those grandpa stories meant to be passed down at a kitchen table with quiet gravity, then let this be the lesson you carry forward. Trust your instincts. Guard your family with courage, and never underestimate what truth can accomplish when it is brought fully into the light. This isn't simply a dramatic account meant to shock. It is a family story about courage under pressure and faith tested in the darkest hours. It is about a father who almost failed, but chose at the last moment to stand firm. And if you hear echoes of other grandpa stories in this one's stories, where hard lessons are learned through fire, then understand that those lessons exist for a reason. They are reminders that vigilance is love in action. There is another truth I carry now. Protecting your family does not always mean shielding them from every storm. Sometimes it means walking beside them into the storm. Sometimes it means admitting you were wrong to ignore your intuition. Sometimes it means apologizing for nearly choosing comfort over courage. In every meaningful family story, growth comes through honesty, through difficult conversations, through facing what you'd rather avoid. If this message resonated with you, if something in it stirred a memory or a warning or a realization, let me know where you're watching from. I read those comments more than you think. Share this family story with someone who might need the reminder that instincts matter and courage counts. And if you believe more, grandpa stories like this should be told not just for entertainment, but for the lessons they carry. Consider subscribing and staying connected. We live in a world where noise is constant, and truth is often buried beneath distraction. But when truth is exposed, when people refuse to look away, when witnesses stand together, darkness loses ground. That's what I saw the night everything changed. Not just danger, not just fear, but community, accountability, light. Thank you for walking through this journey with me from beginning to end. Thank you for listening carefully. Thank you for caring about people you may never meet. And one final reminder offered gently. Some upcoming stories may include dramatized elements created for educational and storytelling purposes. They are meant to illuminate lessons, not to mislead. If that style isn't what you're looking for, there's no pressure. Choose the content that speaks to you. But wherever you go next, remember this trust. What your heart warns you about, protect those you love fiercely, and never forget that even one voice, when joined by thousands, can change everything.